Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Start with the Mangekyō and leave Konoha with Madara. Chapter 61. Konoha Village. On the ruins, a figure stood proudly, the unburned firelight shone on him, reflecting the blood-red Sharingan flickering. At his feet, Sarutobi Sasuke lay limply on the ground, breathless, and the Sarutobi demon also turned into white smoke and dissipated due to the death of the master of the spiritual contract. Fire Core. Senju Hashirama's face was stern, and his pupils were filled with rage. Why did you do this? Shinyu scratched his head in distress. How should I answer you? It can be said that it was a whim, or it can be said that it was planned for a long time. Anyway, I just did it if I wanted to. Brother, he is not Uchiha Fire Core. Tobirama walked up, his face solemn. Although the impression of Fire Core is that he is from the Uchiha clan, he is humble and easygoing. He always sticks to Konoha's guidelines and coordinates perfectly every time. This is why Konoha is willing to support him to become the clan leader. But the look in the man's eyes was too strange, too evil, and completely different from the gentle and humble Huohei. I am Uchiha Shenyu, the sharp blade of Uchiha Madara. Shenyu controlled Huohei's body and introduced himself. What? When these words came out, everyone was shocked. The shadows of the four major ninja villages looked at each other, and everyone could see the shock in each other's eyes. The second-generation Tsuchikage had a sharp look in his eyes. He was about to step forward, but he found that Hazuka Wanyu, who was just beside him, had retreated behind everyone without knowing when, sneaking around. Hashirama immediately stepped forward, his eyes were like torches. Is Madara still alive? Kamiyuki showed a sly smile. Yes. Am I a child? Still guessing. Hashirama glared and said anxiously, where is he now? Was he the one who did the Nine-Tails thing? Was it Madara's idea that you attacked Konoha for no reason? Mr. Hashirama, you have a lot of questions, but fortunately I know them all. The answer to every question is here. Kamiyuki raised his hand and pointed to his head, but I refused to answer. Tobirama stared at Kamiyuki, or more precisely at Uchiha Hunhei's face, with thoughts flashing in his mind. Whether it is visual feedback or chakra detection feedback, the person in front of him must be Uchiha Hunhei himself, but what exactly made him become someone else's puppet? Single quote. Is it the illusion of the Mangekyō Sharingan? No illusion can manipulate a puppet so exquisitely, even the expression is the same as the real body, so there is only one possibility. Single quote. 11 years ago, one of the forbidden techniques taken away by Shenyu, the spiritualization technique. Not only that, the principle of the spiritualization technique is to separate the spirit from the body, transform it into a spirit, and attach it to the enemy. If the mental power is stronger than the opponent, the enemy's body can be directly controlled. However, the body still has the soul of the original owner. Under the interference and restraint of the original soul, the caster must always fight for the sovereignty of the body. Even if it is controlled, it will not be so flexible and free. Unless, the spiritualization technique and the mental power of Uchiha have some strange reaction, allowing the caster's spirit to have the power to manipulate the target soul at will. As the deduction progressed, Tobirama's brows became more and more tightly knitted, and his face was so gloomy that water was about to drip out. Since it is the spiritualization technique, he put his hands behind his back and silently made a few gestures. Around, several Anbu ninjas from the barrier class immediately understood and quietly left the scene under the cover of the night. Okay, the reminiscing session ends here. Shenyu clapped his hands. I'm here to declare war. I'm only representing myself, declaring war on your 5 major countries and 5 cages at the same time. Humph, how arrogant. Reikage slowly took off his jacket, revealing his dark and strong muscles. Mr. Hashirama, let me kill this beast for you. Except for Hazuka Wanyu, the other cages were also ready to move. Wait, Hashirama raised his hand and pressed it. Since it's a declaration of war, why don't you use your own body, hiding your head and showing your tail? Is that what Madara taught you? Mr. Hashirama, you are not worthy of preaching to me. Shenyu looked around the heroes, and said word by word, in a low voice, I wish you good luck in the next battle. Now, the war begins. As soon as he let go, several smoke bombs specially made by the cat house exploded instantly, and a huge amount of white smoke swallowed everyone in an instant. Hashirama's expression condensed, and he waved with one hand. Brother, Tobirama shouted. Wind style. Airflow dance. The second Tsuchikage made a move, and a whirlwind swept through, blowing away all the white smoke, revealing the situation inside. A huge vine grew from the ruins, tightly binding Uchiha Higan's body, and dozens of wooden thorns hung above his head, ready to go, while Higan's eyes were closed, completely unconscious. Is it so easy? The Raikage moved his shoulders somewhat disinterestedly. Uchiha Madara's blade, is this the strength? Don't be careless, this kid is very difficult to deal with. Tobirama reminded in a deep voice, and the solemnity on his face did not diminish at all. As soon as the voice fell, a shrill voice sounded from behind everyone. Steaming danger and violent power. Tobirama looked back in horror, his pupils shrank to the point of a needle. The center of the venue was instantly detonated, and the gushing hot air blew in all directions. The Konoha Academy, which had been blown into ruins, was directly flattened. This was a steam explosion that condensed most of the chakra of Wanyu. The billowing white mist rushed into the sky, and everyone present except Hashirama was blown away. Ghost, lantern, Wanyu. Quote, the second-generation Tsuchikage's eyes were bloodshot. He noticed the abnormality of Wanyu just before the steam exploded, and his body flew out subconsciously, but Onoki was blown away by the explosion and fell unconscious. He tried his best to stabilize his body in midair, with his palms together. Lord Tsuchikage, don't be impulsive, Lord Mizukage is under control. Tobirama shouted hurriedly. However, his urgent cry was insignificant in front of Wu, who was full of murderous intent. He saw a white light light up in front of Wu, the light twisted, and a well-proportioned translucent cylinder quickly took shape in his hands. Calm down. A huge wooden dragon broke out of the ground and opened its mouth to bite Wu in midair. Tisk. Wu snorted coldly, and had to interrupt the ninjutsu, and lightly avoided the wooden dragon. While everyone was fighting, Wanyu kept making hand seals, not only summoning his own big clam, but also the clown clone cooled and appeared in a hazy mist. At this moment, everyone present could not see, as if they were in the abyss, and all the light was taken away. Illusion darkness walking technique. Hashirama wandered in the darkness and easily found Wanyu's true body. It turned out that Wanyu just now was just a fake body made of mirage. Uchiha Shenyu, the farce should end. Hashirama quickly made hand seals and pressed one hand to Wanyu's forehead, Quan Ryu Kui Sho. Quote, Zuo, character composed entirely of spells appeared in his palm. This move can suppress the soul, seal chakra, and even suppress the tailed beasts. Huan Yu shook his body, and his eyes suddenly regained clarity. He stared at the oncoming big hand and screamed, "Ow lao!" His head quickly turned into water, automatically splitting to both sides, and Hashirama slapped nothing. Huan Yu took 2 steps back in shock, sat on the ground, and gasped heavily. What happened? He looked at his hands. Why did my body suddenly consume so much chakra, water, and oil? Is it back to normal? Hashirama explained, you are controlled by a spirit, which is really tricky. I didn't expect that Shenyu's mental power is so strong. Possessed, Huan Yu secretly said with bad luck. First, get rid of your water and oil clones and summoned beasts, said Hashirama. Huan Yu nodded weakly and raised his hands to release the seal. In fact, when he regained his sanity, the clown clone had already stopped moving. At this moment, something strange happened. Dust release. Original realm peeling technique. The cylinder that frightened everyone present, floating in the air like a god judging all living things, appeared again. It was like a miniature barrier, with no high temperature or fluctuations on the surface. It just floated quietly in the air, with a strange light shining in the center. Dust release. Original world stripping technique. A beam of light swooped down and shot straight, illuminating Hashirama and Hazuka behind him in brilliant white. The water vapor and thick smoke seemed to be split by a sharp sword, and everything along the way was instantly cleared. Buzz. Hashirama's expression moved, and the right half of his body quickly popped out a towering tree, not only pushing his body away, but also blocking Hazuka behind him. The beam of light flashed and pierced through the giant tree without any hindrance, like a hot knife cutting into butter. A large round hole immediately appeared in Hazuka's chest. There was no blood, only evaporating water vapor floating out. Bandage man. Hazuka's facial features were ferocious, and his veins were exposed. His hands that were originally about to release the seal changed accordingly, and the clone rose from the ground and shot towards Wu in the air. With a swish, the clown's arm turned into a huge blade and chased after the second-generation Tsuchikage. This clone, which is made entirely of water and oil, not only has the ability to fly in the air, but also moves extremely fast. In terms of physical skills alone, it is comparable to the cage level. In the mind of the second-generation Tsuchikage, in a colorful world, Shen Yu's spirit sneered slightly. The darkness technique did deprive him of his perception of light, but he was not seeing the world with his eyes now. With his powerful soul perception, he pulled out of Huan Yu's mind just before Hashirama arrived and instantly sank into Wu's brow. At this moment, his palm was full of light, pressing on Wu's spiritual body. Under the blessing and hypnosis of illusion, he was like a player of a VR game. Even if he did not know how to use the unique skills of the operator, he could use illusion to command them to release. Although the operation was very stiff, the person being manipulated was as obedient as a puppet and would decisively execute all his orders. This was different from when he controlled Uchiha Fire Core. The guy's spirit body was completely knocked out by Shen Yu and thrown aside. Shen Yu controlled his body in a similar way to possession, temporarily taking over the body instead of his soul. Although this method can adapt to the opponent's body to the greatest extent and is flexible and calm, it cannot display their own secret skills. The two methods of possession have their own advantages and disadvantages. Hide, he whispered. The view was pulled back to the field, the clone attacked, the second-generation Tsuchikage lightly dodged the attack, and his palms were pulled apart again, and a cylinder that was enough to decompose everything appeared again. Suddenly, 3 Anbu rushed out, and their hands made a circle at the same time, aiming at Wu in the air. Heart-turning technique. 3 spiritual energies invaded Wu's mind at the same time. Shen Yu smiled slightly and immediately locked the position of the 3 people's real bodies. Without any hesitation, he immediately withdrew from Wu's mind, and his spirit shot out like a whistle arrow, circling and instantly piercing the eyebrows of 3 Anbu. The spiritual energy that invaded Wu's mind collapsed, and the 3 people bled from all 7 orifices, and their lives were unknown. In terms of lethality alone, in front of the spiritual transformation technique, the heart-turning technique is as immature as a child. If you have to describe the difference between the two, it's like an ordinary Kimen technique encountering Fenghu Kimen. Wu's consciousness returned to normal, and his mind was a little confused, so he didn't notice a kunai shot into the air. Then, Senju Tobarama suddenly appeared behind Wu, and controlled the other party with a move of strong man locking man, and the two fell from midair together. "Brother, keep an eye on Mr. Mizukage," he shouted hurriedly. Without him saying anything more, Hashirama had already used his means to try to trap Hazuka Wanyu. However, at this moment, a figure with lightning flashing all over his body suddenly attacked behind Tobarama, and hit him hard with an elbow on the back of his waist, knocking him far away. Raikage. Feng Rito was stunned. Before he could speak, the guard shaman behind him suddenly threw out a scroll, and white smoke burst. With a burst of gla gra, 10 slender puppets in white clothes floated in the air, and their swords flashed coldly. Jinmatsu 10 guards. Rito immediately turned around. "Shaman, you don't need to do anything here." He was stunned. Jinmatsu 10 guards did not help the Hokage, but circled into the crowd outside, scattering poison needles, and thousands of flying, launching an indiscriminate massacre. "You are also possessed." Rito was shocked and was about to take action to control his men. A flash of lightning flashed in front of him, and the Raikage was like a thunderbolt in the clouds, and his iron fist was wrapped in rolling thunder and killed him in front of him. On the other side, even without deliberate control, Wu and Wanyu also killed each other. The two figures fought in midair, and the dust release suddenly appeared, and the water cannon fired randomly. The two had already fought with real fire, and they were determined to fight to the death. Because of the previous attack, Tobarama seemed to think that the Raikage was under control, and the flying thunder god flashed and pierced his face. Hashirama controlled the wood release to smash the puppet, but it was inconvenient. The explosive force suppressed everyone, and it was hard to explain who was hurt, so it was inevitable that he was tied up. The scene soon became a mess. In the dust and smoke, Shen Yu's spirit had already separated from the battle, and shot straight towards the Uzumaki shrine like a meteor in the sky. "Old man, you still hold a grudge. He sneered and withdrew his attention from Tobirama. In fact, he originally wanted to control the first generation of Kazekage, but he sensed that this guy's mental power was not weak, and could even be on par with Senju Tobirama, so he had to give up the possession. Anyway, the scene was already chaotic enough. In the soul perception, the interior of Konoha village, with the Hokage building as the center, was covered by the barrier for several thousand meters, tightly fitting. Tobirama, you were really smart. Shen Yu's face was indifferent, but I am not unprepared. A day ago, Konoha opened the village entrance to welcome guests, and his spirit and the transformed cat Pochi successfully sneaked in. Uchiha Huohei went out for some fresh air after getting drunk, and was attracted by a delicate cat cry in the bushes. He walked over and parted the bushes, and found a blue kitten, with a faint glow all over its body, and stripes constantly changing colors, which was magnificent. He recognized Pochi's identity and found that it was holding a crystal bottle in its mouth. As soon as it got it, it lost consciousness. It was at this time that Shenyu completed the possession. Although Huohei is one of the strongest men in Uchiha today, he is still a chicken and a dog in front of Shenyu's huge mental power, weak and helpless. As for the purpose of sneaking into Konoha and causing these incidents, Shenyu suddenly accelerated, and the spirit dived into the Uzumaki shrine. The surrounding ninjas, guards, and servants ignored him. He passed through layers of ceilings and walls, and finally saw the target. A baby girl who was still in swaddling clothes and whose hair had not been shaved clean. Tsunade. Shinyu smiled, instantly possessed a maid, slightly moved his shoulders, and then came to the cradle. Uzumaki Shrine. Shenyu came to the cradle silently and looked at the baby girl in the cradle. Chubby little Tsunade exuded a faint milky fragrance. Her skin was soft and tender. Her chubby face was as soft as a baby's, her hair was beautiful golden, and her big watery eyes were clear and bright. At this moment, she was sucking her little hand and looking around curiously. The little thing is quite cute. Shenyu carefully stretched out his arms and picked up Tsunade, holding her little butt with one hand and holding her head with the other, and gently held her in his arms. Tsunade did not cry, but slowly turned her head and looked at him with her innocent big eyes without blinking. "Ah," she called vaguely. Shenyu looked at her, facing her innocent eyes. He felt a little guilty for some reason. "Listen carefully, I just want to kill your second grandfather, it has nothing to do with you, you will understand." "Ah," Tsunade blinked, a little confused. "Don't worry, as long as you cooperate, I won't hurt you at all." Shenyu wiped the non-existent sweat and whispered, "I will kidnap you and lure your two grandfathers out in a while, will you cooperate?" Quote. "Don't talk, that means you agree. Don't cry, don't make a fuss, we will leave the village quietly, don't cry, don't cry." Shenyu tried to make his tone as gentle as possible, coaxing and holding Tsunade out, and soon walked out of the bedroom. "Yuki, why did you carry Tsunade out?" A woman came over. Judging from her clothes and temperament, she should be a role like the head maid. She was furious and scolded him. "Don't you know how dangerous it is outside? A powerful enemy is attacking the village, and the Hokage is fighting bloody battles. If you don't want to live, do you want to take the princess out to die?" Shenyu sent Tsunade out without saying a word. The head maid was stunned, and before her brain could react, she stretched out her hand and picked up Tsunade skillfully. The clear and light spirit sank into the head maid's eyebrows, and the exchange was completed in an instant. Why am I here?" The maid regained consciousness, her eyes full of confusion, and she had completely lost her previous memory. "Yuki, hey." Kamyu walked out holding Tsunade, with a serious look on his face. "Why are you still standing here? A powerful enemy attacked the village. I just received an order. He is coming for Princess Tsunade, and has already got Princess Tsunade's location, and is rushing here." "Ah." The maid panicked and covered her mouth. "What should I do?" "What do you mean? Go back to your original position immediately, pretend that Princess Tsunade is still there, pretend that nothing happened, I will move the princess out now." "Oh, okay." The maid was flustered and turned around and walked back. "Hurry up, this is the order of Lord Tobirama, really." Kamyu cursed, but he didn't stop and ran out of the ancestral hall. He met many people along the way, but they were all servants of low status. At this moment, Uzumaki Mito was not there. She was comforting the guests in the Hokage building as the hostess. The head maid was the most powerful in the entire Uzumaki Ancestral Hall. Although many people cast inquiring glances at him, they all retreated in anger under his deliberate frown. He took 2 steps at a time and soon left the Uzumaki shrine and came to the street. The novel was taken from the Raleigh's website. Close where you're reading it and support us on our website for more free novels. Taking advantage of the fact that there was no one around, he also sped up. The head maid was not a regular ninja, but there was chakra in her body. Under Shenyu's exquisite micro-manipulation, she could burst out at a speed that was not inferior to that of a genin. Of course, this was achieved at the expense of the host's physical strength. For an untrained person, forcing a burst of speed would only cause muscle strain, and the price was, this head maid might have to lie in Konoha hospital for several months. On the street, several chunins stared blankly at the maid who was leaping between high-rise buildings with her skirt flying like a butterfly, and looked at each other in bewilderment. Hey, why are you walking so fast? Lord Hokage and Lord Tobirama have already gone to deal with the enemy. A ninja with no sense of propriety caught up with him. Shenyu muttered, "Trouble," and stopped immediately. The little Tsunade in his arms was shaken by the sudden speed. He blinked his confused eyes and cried loudly. The crisp cry immediately attracted the attention of the Jonin. "You still have a child." The Jonin walked over, and when he saw the baby girl, his eyes widened. "This is Princess Tsunade." Shenyu quickly exited the head maid's body, and his spirit flashed and sank into the Jonin's eyebrows. He was quick-witted and took a step forward to catch the shaky Tsunade, and at the same time chopped the head maid's neck with a knife, knocking her out. "Ah!" Tsunade cried even harder, doubting the little thing, with 2 small fists folded in front of its chest and its mouth open, launched a harsh sound wave attack at Shenyu. "Good boy, brother will show you a cat later." Shenyu hurriedly perfunctorily ran in a certain direction. Fortunately, after switching to the host of the Jonin, his movement speed has been qualitatively improved. He flew over the eaves and walls, jumped over the house and ridges, and soon arrived at the destination. Uchiha Jing stared blankly at the strange ninja who turned over to the Hokage rock, especially after seeing the crying baby girl in the other's arms. He was a little confused for a while. "This is Princess Tsunade." He recognized the identity of the baby girl and was shocked. Shouldn't she be in the Whirlpool Shrine? No time to explain. Shenyu's face was serious, and he said to himself, "I know, soul detection is not a lie." He came to Jing with Tsunade in his arms and handed it directly. Jing also subconsciously reached out to take it. At this moment, Shenyu's spirit shot out from the brow of the Jonin and entered his brother's sea of consciousness without any hindrance. In the colorful world, Uchiha Jing looked up in a daze, looking at the person in front of him, with the corners of his mouth trembling slightly. "Shenyu, call me brother." Shenyu curled his lips, and a huge mental power suddenly surged out of his spirit body, shaking the whole world. Facing the overwhelming pressure, Jing's soul was like a lone boat on the sea, swaying in the wind and rain, and in danger. After 6 years of practice, Shenyu's soul has climbed to an exaggerated strength. This is the result of the continuous interaction between Uchiha's mental power and the spiritualization technique. Even some cage-level strongmen cannot match him, let alone this half-baked brother. Shenyu didn't waste any words and raised his palm directly. Jing was a key link in his plan, and he was too lazy to reminisce with his brother. The palm of his hand burst out with a clear light, and the illusion hit instantly, controlling his brother's soul. The host's sea of consciousness is his domain. Here, his illusion is 100% sure to hit. "Catch the baby girl, be gentle," he ordered. In reality, everything that just happened in a moment. Jing looked dull, but still reached out and caught the swaddling clothes steadily. "It really surprised me that you actually learned the Flying Thunder God technique, but this also saves me a lot of trouble." In the sea of consciousness, Shenyu put his palm on his brother's head and opened his lips slightly. "Activate the Flying Thunder God technique, take the baby girl in your arms, and move to the farthest place from Konoha." Uchiha Jing seemed to have become a walking corpse, unconditionally executing every order of Shenyu. The evening breeze blew gently, and his figure disappeared on the spot. The barrier covering half of Konoha village could not trap him at all. Thousands of miles away, outside a wealthy town in the land of hot springs. The evening breeze was cool, Soothing and comfortable, the leaves rustled, and the moonlight sprinkled on the bluestones by the road, creating a quiet and peaceful scene. The light twisted slightly, and a figure quietly appeared beside the bluestone. Wow wow wow. As the figure appeared, the shrill cry of a baby broke the silence. Shen Yu controlled Jing's body, holding the crying Tsunade in his arms, and subconsciously scanned the surroundings. According to Jing's memory, this was the farthest place he had been on a mission, and he and his teammates had a happy hot spring bath at that time. He deliberately left his flying thunder god mark on the bluestone so that he could rush over to the hot springs immediately when he was physically and mentally exhausted. The boy is quite good at enjoying himself. In Jing's sea of consciousness, Shen Yu's spirit muttered, with a little envy in his tone, and the soul of the original owner of the body had been thrown aside. His original plan was to let the ninja cat bribed by Pochi use the reverse summoning technique to summon Uchiha Jing to the cat house. Unexpectedly, this younger brother did not stay idle for 6 years and actually learned the Flying Thunder God technique, which saved a lot of trouble. However, we still have to quickly place this little thing. Konoha should have reacted. Earlier, he used the ghost lantern illusion to summon the big clam to create an illusion. This was not for fighting, but to cover up his tracks. In the illusion of the mirage, people in the field cannot observe the situation outside, and people outside the field cannot see the situation in the field. What they observe is just the illusion of everything is normal. Because of this, Shen Yu's kidnapping can be carried out so smoothly. He stepped into the town. Because it was in the countryside, the nightlife of the town residents was not so rich. The only one that was still lit was a noisy gambling house. He pushed the door and walked in. The handsome boy and the crying baby girl soon attracted a lot of strange looks. Fortunately, this was a gambling house. Everyone was concerned about the outcome of their gambling games and was busy pushing cards and betting. This kind of attention soon disappeared. Shen Yu generously paid for the guest room and went straight to the second floor with the key. He walked into the bedroom, locked the door, and then put little Tsunade on the bed. Because it was a rural town, the sound insulation of the gambling house was not good, and there would be faint shouting sounds coming in. Strangely, when Tsunade heard these sounds, she slowly stopped crying. She twisted her body, and her 2 little hands broke free from the swaddling clothes. Her little eyes turned again and again, as if she was observing and listening. Ah! She waved her arms randomly, and a sweet smile appeared on her chubby little face. Happy. That's great. It seems that you are also trying hard to cooperate. Thank you. I will kill your second grandfather. Shen Yu didn't have time to care about her. He was thankful that she didn't cry or make a fuss. He reached into his arms and took out a smooth and small glass bottle. The bottle was transparent, only half the size of a little finger, and it was filled with bright red blood, flowing with an intoxicating glimmer under the light. This was his own blood, which he had secretly placed on Jing's body a long time ago. Crack! He crushed the glass bottle, formed a seal with the blood in his palm, and then slapped the floor. Hi, Shu, Yu, Shen, Wei. Spiritual art. White smoke scattered, accompanied by the misty blue mist. Pochi walked out leisurely with an elegant cat step. Watch this girl, don't let her be disturbed. If there is really blind, just kill her directly. He instructed. Pochi nodded. Don't worry, the money is in place, these are not a problem. By the way, it jumped onto the bed lightly, and its bronze eyes looked at Uchiha Jing's face. You 2 brothers look quite similar, but your eyebrows and eyes are a little different. Nonsense, don't you look like your brothers? Shen Yu glanced at it. Pochi smiled, but this smile was a little cold. I would like to confirm, but there is no chance. My mother gave birth to a group of brothers and sisters when she was on the run, and they died not long after. I only remember that it was in a garbage dump. In order to survive, I ate them all. It licked its paw. Hee, fratricide, I am too familiar with it. Then take their share and do your best to survive. Shen Yu said lightly. Pochi was stunned, and a trace of astonishment flashed across the cat's face. It looked up and stared into Shen Yu's eyes, as if looking into his soul. After a while, it laughed. You kid, you are really different from others. Is this the reason why you signed a spiritual contract with me? Don't get me wrong, it's just because you can afford it. Shen Yu reminded him again, and then he said not to mention controlling Jing's body and performing the Flying Thunder God technique. The light was distorted, the space changed, and in just a moment, he appeared in Konoha village and returned to the Hokage rock. You guy, did you do it on purpose? In front of the Uzumaki shrine, Tobirama grabbed the collar of Hazuka Wanyu, his face twitching. How do I know that I'm possessed? I didn't release the illusion. Wanyu tucked his hands into his sleeves, looking innocent. Besides, everyone here is a cage, one by one. How can the illusion of the big clam deceive you? The second generation Tsuchikage snorted coldly. Were you also possessed when you chased me and fired a cannon at me? I think you are Uchiha Shenyu's insider. You colluded to steal the little princess of Konoha. You dead bandage man, stop spitting blood, people. Wanyu was anxious. How many heads do I have to dare to attack Konoha? What's the point of me stealing someone's little princess? You just want to frame me and kill someone with a borrowed knife. Speaking of this, his eyes turned smartly. Yes, you have the strongest perception among the ninjas present. You can't fail to see through the steaming tower of the big clam. Hee, if you ask me, you are the spy. You too, enough. The silent Hashirama suddenly spoke. His voice was low and cold, and his eyes seemed to be swallowed by shadows. The two of them were silent immediately. Wu looked at the back. Under the vast pressure, he only felt that he was insignificant, and Wanyu was even more frightened and paralyzed. Several shadows looked at each other, and their expressions were not natural. After all, everyone's face was bruised. A minute ago, Hashirama controlled several, suddenly crazy, shadows with overwhelming strength, and the chaotic situation was suppressed. But when he returned to the Hokage building, he was told that his granddaughter had been stolen. No matter what his purpose is, it is unforgivable to attack a child. Hashirama clenched his fists, and his voice was cold. Tobirama pondered for a moment and said, I have set up a barrier. He is a spirit and cannot perform reverse summoning. Without the help of outsiders, he will definitely not be able to escape from the village. In other words, he is still here, but he is hiding. He immediately ordered, notify everyone that a strong enemy is coming. All villagers are gathering in front of the Hokage building. We will investigate one by one, and then notify the Perception class ninjas and the Hyuga clan to search in all directions. Don't let go of every corner. We must find Suna. Just then, a figure swished in front of everyone. Uchiha Kagami. Mirror. Tobirama looked at his disciple in confusion, and for a moment, a hint of suspicion flashed in his eyes. Are you looking for me? Uchiha Mirror opened his hands, his eyes frivolous. No need to bother, I'll stand here. In an instant, everyone recognized the true identity of the man in front of them, and a sense of shame of being played with surged in their hearts. Earth escaped Gangly-style hand. The second generation Tsuchikage immediately formed a seal, and a huge rock hand emerged from the ground and slapped Shenyu. Shenyu stood calmly in place, without any posture of fighting. Hashirama twisted his feet, and several thick vines stretched out from Shenyu's feet, quickly spinning into a wooden shield. With a bang, the rock hand was firmly stopped and could not move forward. A breeze suddenly rose, and Shenyu's eyes were calm, only the scattered hair fluttered in the wind. Tsunade, where is she? Hashirama asked in a low voice. What Tsunade? Shenyu showed a puzzled expression, pretending to be stupid. Aren't you looking for me? Don't play dumb, I know it was you who kidnapped Tsunade. Hashirama stepped forward. She is just a baby, and the grudge between us has nothing to do with her. Where did you hide her? I don't understand what you are saying. Shenyu waved his hand, looking indifferent. I just created chaos. You guys lost a child and you want to blame me. Uchiha Shenyu. Tobirama said angrily. Don't think you can do whatever you want by relying on your special spirit. I have more than a dozen ways to kill you. I spared your life so that you can tell me where Tsunade is. So you can get angry, old fox. Shenyu seemed to have achieved his goal, holding his forehead and laughing up to the sky. Ha 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 ha. There will be a day when you lose your temper like this. Everyone was silent, only he was crazy. In this strange atmosphere, Shenyu's laughter slowed down, and he calmed his breathing slightly. Tsunade is indeed hidden by me, and she is not in Konoha. Even if you turn the whole village upside down, you can't find her. Unless, Shenyu changed the subject. Unless what? Hashirama said anxiously. Brother, I think he is teasing us on purpose. Tobarama's face was terribly gloomy, and his eyes were full of murderous intent. Wait until I catch him and interrogate his spirit in person, and I can also get information. Hashirama stretched out his hand to stop him. Let him talk. It's very simple. Shenyu stretched out a finger, and everyone was shocked. All the shadows except Hashirama took a step back vigilantly and waited for battle. They were all shocked by Shenyu's silky, spiritualization technique, just now. Therefore, everyone was paying attention to his every move, and they were very alert, and no details could be missed. However, he just slowly pointed at Hashirama and asked a strange question. Master Hashirama, who is more important, brothers or granddaughter? Dead silence. Hashirama's face was shrouded in a shadow, and the huge momentum slowly stagnated, suppressing everyone to dare not breathe. Shenyu lightly stated the conditions. I will give you 3 choices. First, commit suicide now. Second, kill your brother next to you. The third one is easier for you. Look back at the shadows behind you, and choose anyone to kill. I promise, as long as you do any one of them, I will return your precious granddaughter to you intact. Hashirama stood still, his breath heavy, standing there like a clay sculpture, and Tobarama looked cold and silently raised a finger. Compared with these two, the shadows of the 4 major ninja villages behind them were much more miserable. The wind shadow had an ugly face, and the thunder shadow couldn't help swallowing his saliva. Although he couldn't see the expression of the Tsuchikage, he quietly took a step back. But the expression of Hazuka Wanyu was more vivid. He looked at Shenyu, then glanced at Hashirama, and then looked at Shenyu. He looked back and forth like this, and the 2 words, nervous, were already written on his face, fearing that he would really be killed. It's just nonsense, Tobarama said coldly, and then looked at Hashirama. What are you going to do, brother, to kill me? Kill these shadows, or to commit suicide for this guy's nonsense? It's ridiculous. I said don't pay attention to him. As he spoke, he inexplicably felt that this sentence had a sense of déjà vu. He curled his lips. Really, it's the same as that guy Madara. At this time, Hashirama spoke. Are you testing me? Shenyu tilted his head, leisurely. Both the first and second points require me to make a choice between the roots and buds of Konoha and me. As for the third point, it is a complete violation of peace. Even if I have to sacrifice Suna, I will not give up the hard-earned peace. Collapse. Hashirama said word by word. So, in order to protect the village and the peace in your eyes, even if your relatives, close friends, and companions die for it, you have to continue to persevere. Shenyu looked directly into Hashirama's eyes. But isn't the existence of the village to protect relatives, close friends, and companions? Lord Madara is right. You have put the cart before the horse. I can't listen anymore. Tobarama walked out of the crowd with a stern face. Give me a few minutes, I will arrest his spirit. Wait. Hashirama stopped his brother, looked at Shenyu deeply, and then pulled out a kunai. He sighed. Perhaps, this is fate. From the moment I chose to kill Madara, it was like a demon that entangled me, fate. Brother, you are not kidding. Mr. Hashirama. Hokage-sama. Quote. Ignoring everyone's consolation, Hashirama resolutely turned the kunai upside down and aimed it at his heart. In this era, sooner or later, there will be new buds. Remember, when it comes to the moment of life and death, only by burning these dead and rotten trees like us can new trees thrive. Hashirama looked at the sky and whispered, may the fire of Konoha last forever. Pa! The sudden applause sounded, and everyone was stunned, frowning and looking at Shenyu. You are worthy of being the god of ninjas, worthy of being the man recognized by Madara-sama. Your awareness, I understand. Shenyu smiled indifferently. I changed my mind, Mr. Hashirama. As long as you come with me, I will tell you the location of Tsunade. Why? Hashirama was slightly startled. Shenyu responded. Because, I want to see you in person when you can still burn. Okay. Hashirama nodded in agreement and walked over without any defense. Brother, don't agree to him, Tobarama advised. This kid is extremely cunning, his words can't be trusted. Haha, when it comes to cunning, who can compare with you, Lord Tobarama? Shenyu's eyes were mocking. Except Lord Hashirama, no one is allowed to follow, otherwise, don't blame me for being a villain. At this moment, his smile was full of ferocity and decisiveness, and no one who saw it would doubt the truth of his words. Hashirama agreed to Shenyu's request and walked to Shenyu's side. I remind you that my perception is not weaker than any of you. If you act rashly, you will not only not hurt me, but also harm your good granddaughter. Shenyu's eyes slowly swept over Tobarama and the several shadows behind him. If some people are smart enough to follow, I can guarantee that your ninja village will be more lively than Konoha tonight. Kid, Tobarama was so angry that his teeth itched, and his eyes seemed to want to eat Shenyu alive. After saying that, Shenyu put his hand on Hashirama, and the Flying Thunder God technique was activated, and the two disappeared instantly. Pass the order down, send someone to the cat house immediately, and let the Uchiha people lead the way. Tobarama called the Anbu and gave the order with a gloomy face. He tried his best to calm down his anger, took a few breaths to adjust his facial expression, and then slowly turned around. Everyone, are you interested in going with me to see Shen Yu's true body later? Ah, this. Huan Yu was embarrassed. We are here to attend the 100 Days banquet. Now that the protagonist is not here, there is no need to hold this banquet. He met Tobarama's cold eyes and shook his head indifferently. I just said it very clearly that whoever catches up will be retaliated. I am not sure I can keep him. That makes sense. The second generation Tsuchikage reached a consensus with Huan Yu for the first time. Although his voice was dull, it was sonorous and powerful. I am here to toast in the Hidden Rock Village, not to make enemies. Reto stroked his beard and nodded. That makes sense. My sand village is unwilling to provoke such a lunatic for no reason. This is your Konoha's family affair, and it is not convenient for me to intervene in the Hidden Cloud Village. The Thunder Shadow was silent for a moment and also expressed his opinion. You, Tobarama looked like he was disappointed with his son. He is Madara's disciple and inherited his crazy ideas. Now that things have come to this, you actually think he won't attack you? Huan Yu shook his sleeves and walked towards the gate of Konoha. Sorry, I suddenly have something urgent to do in Kurigakure. I'm leaving now. No need to see you off. Under his lead, the Cage and the Rakage led their subordinates to leave the scene one by one, and the crowd of onlookers soon became sparse. The second generation Tsuchikage did not leave Konoha immediately because his disciple was still lying in the hospital, but he also left without saying a word. Soon, only Tobarama was left standing alone in front of the Uzumaki shrine. He looked into the distance, his fists clenched and creaked. Thousands of miles away, Taki country, the coast of the North Sea. With the continuous flashing of the Flying Thunder God technique, Kamiya and Hashirama soon arrived at their destination. The Flying Thunder God technique is really useful, but it's a pity. In Jing's Sea of Consciousness, Shen Yu's spirit smacked his lips. He had long tried to interrogate Jing's soul, intending to take advantage of the opportunity to get information about the Flying Thunder God technique, but the old ghost Tobarama actually put a ban on it. Before he could search the soul, Jing's soul was wrapped in ink-like restraints, and all information related to the Flying Thunder God technique was sealed. Not only that, when he possessed several shadows in Konoha before, he also tried to interrogate the information about steam danger explosion power, dust release, and lightning release chakra mode, but they were all blocked by similar methods. It seems that in this era, the rights protection work of ninjas is still quite good. Hashirama stood on the shore and looked around. Is your real body here? Shen Yu smiled slightly, and his spirit immediately withdrew from Uchiha Jing's eyebrows. Jing shook on the spot and fell down softly as if he had lost consciousness. Hashirama was quick to help Jing up and let him sit on a reef a little further away. Ah, Master Hashirama. Jing opened his eyes in confusion, looking a little weak. You have consumed too much energy, take a rest. Hashirama said quickly. After resting, leave here immediately. Jing was slightly stunned, and the memory before he lost consciousness suddenly came like a tide. That was the scene when Shen Yu invaded his mind. I was possessed. Jing was a little flustered. What did he do with my body? It doesn't matter. Hashirama comforted him in a broad voice. You are a kind child, everything that happened here has nothing to do with you, recover quickly and then leave here. However, Jing could no longer listen. In his mind, the memories of Shen Yu controlling him came one after another, and countless information spread rapidly, almost bursting his fragile mood. Shen Yu did not deliberately block Jing's soul, so the things he did with Jing's body were now completely presented in Jing's mind like a revolving lantern. Taking advantage of the chaos to steal Tsunade. Ridiculing the 5 Cage in public. Mocking Tobirama nonchalantly. Using Tsunade to coerce Hashirama, he used my face and my body to do such an excessive thing. Jing knelt weakly on the reef, staring at his trembling hands with disbelief on his face. His Sharingan opened like a stress, and tears flowed uncontrollably, as if he had done those unforgivable things. Jing was almost out of control. I'm sorry. If I could react earlier, if I could understand everything about him earlier, all of this would not have happened. No, I can still save it, I can still make up for it, Master Hashirama, I know where Princess Tsunade is. His eyes lit up, as if a bonfire was lit in a dry well. Lord Hashirama, Princess Tsunade is in a casino in a coastal town in the Kingdom of Hot Springs. We are going to bring her back now. The Kingdom of Hot Springs. Hashirama said solemnly, facing the sea, then this task is up to you. Jing was stunned and said, what about you? Hashirama stared at the surging sea with a calm look, I have something I must finish. Suddenly, the waves became turbulent, and the sea water formed a huge vortex without wind, which intensified until a strong wind suddenly rose on the sea surface, rolling up a waterspout hundreds of meters high. The huge waves were shaking the whole coast. Hashirama stood quietly on the coast, with moist water vapor coming towards him, and his clothes were torn by the strong wind. He faced the ups and downs of the waves, like a lone boat in a storm. Then, a figure jumped out from the center of the vortex, and the violent sound waves smashed the waterspout to pieces. In the chaotic water splashes, this person stood high in the sky, looking down at Hashirama from a high position. Shenyu walked in the air, his black hair fluttering in the wind, and water molecules automatically gathered under his feet to form a transparent staircase. Water droplets flowed down his handsome and flawless face, and his blood-red eyes were like a vermilion pool under the moon, without any emotion. Hashirama raised his head, and the two stood opposite each other, looking at each other calmly. On the sea, the two stood facing each other. Finally we meet, Uchiha Kamiya. Hashirama spoke first, his eyes scrutinizing, are you the disciple that Madara cares about the most? Master Hashirama is really forgetful. We met 11 years ago. Kamiya smiled. Hashirama sighed, you were so different then than you are now. You were living in an ideal peace. Why do you want to inherit Madara's will? That's just your ideal. Besides, hasn't Master Hashirama changed a lot? Kamiya changed the subject and was not brought into the rhythm by Hashirama's words. I have always been protecting precious things. This has never changed. Hashirama shook his head. Shenyu sneered, the peace you speak of seems to be prosperous and peaceful, but the truth is that this is just a false peace built on your absolute military deterrence. Besides, I seriously doubt whether you still have the strength to suppress everything now. Shenyu pressed the knife with his backhand, and the heart of frost was unsheathed an inch, iron blue light splashed out, and the cold breath quickly went up along the wrist. Hashirama looked up and said in a low voice, I don't want to kill you. Does Mr. Hashirama mean that you can kill me at any time? Shenyu said expressionlessly. Hearing these familiar words, Hashirama's pupils shrank, and a strange emotion spread throughout his body, you and Madara are too similar. Of course, I am his disciple. Hashirama frowned, trying to make a final consolation, Shinyu, why do you have to be like Madara, why are you all so extreme? Things are not irreversible yet. No, it's irreversible. Shenyu's eyes were cold, and there was a shadow in his lowered eyes, unless you give my brother back to me. I'm right here. Jing stood up, with sadness in his eyes, brother, what do you want? Shinyu glanced at him lightly, and his lips opened slightly, what I want is the pure brother who is not brainwashed and does not say, Konoha is everything, all day long. Do you want to follow the same path as Madara? Hashirama was silent for a moment and said slowly. That's right. Shenyu's voice was clear and his emotions were high. If Mr. Hashirama can't kill me today, I will take crazy revenge on Konoha. Not only Tsunade, but also Hyuga, Sarutobi, Uchiha, Senju, and that clan will not have an easy time. Lord Madara is the builder of peace, and I, Uchiha Shenyu, am just a pure destroyer. He pounded his chest and shouted, come on, just like you did to Lord Madara back then, kill me with your own hands. There's no other way. Hashirama finally made up his mind. When he raised his head again, his eyes were full of resolute murderous intent. Uchiha Shenyu, do you think Madara will mourn for you? With a snort, Shenyu took the lead. The Heart of Frost drew a huge blade light in the air, and the jade green light lit up the night sky, and the sea surface was cut in half. Jing's body trembled, and he subconsciously tried to dodge. He felt great danger from the blade. At this moment, a tall figure blocked his way. Wood-style, tree realm wall. Hashirama clasped his hands, and countless thick wooden vines instantly grew out of the ground, turning into a 5-meter thick shield in front of the two of them. Bang! The blade was as thin as a hair, and it slashed fiercely on the wooden wall, with wood chips flying everywhere, until a deep blade mark was left, and then it slowly disappeared. Seeing this scene, Shenyu frowned slightly, and his Sharingan quietly changed, and the Magatama swirled and connected, spreading and stretching, forming a magnificent and exquisite pattern. Jing, let's go, leave this to me. Hashirama didn't look back, staring at the pair of Mangekyō Sharingan with a complicated expression, and said, the task of bringing Suna back to Konoha is now up to you. Hashirama-sama, let's go, this is not a battle you can interfere with. Jing hesitated for a moment, and finally made up his mind. He quietly left a flying thunder god mark on the reef. Hashirama-sama, please be careful, if you can, please spare his life. Hashirama was stunned and looked back at him. What did you say? Do you know that he killed Sasuke? He killed Hiruzen's father. Jing's body shook, and a deep determination still flashed in his eyes. I am willing to use my life to exchange for his life. It is me who caused all this today. Hashirama looked at him deeply, and the boy's face was intertwined with fatigue and sadness, as well as a strong sense of self-blame. He sighed softly. I will try my best. Yeah, Jing nodded heavily, and his body disappeared instantly. Finally, I can use my full strength. Shenyu raised his lips. Suddenly, his sword slashed hundreds of sword chi in one breath, green streams of light crisscrossed and slashed, and the air was torn with a buzzing sound. Hashirama stood still, and as his hands were raised one after another, huge tree roots kept emerging from the ground. He was like a conductor standing in front of the stage waving a baton, and those trees that rose and fell were his symphony orchestra. Crack, crack, the sword chi slashed into the bushes, like a mud cow entering the sea. The broken branches and leaves were messy like cotton wool, but no sword chi could break through Hashirama's defense. The entire coast was covered with a forest of hundreds of meters in radius. Shenyu was holding a sword in his hand, leaning forward in the air to gather momentum, using the water barrier as a pedal, and kicked hard. Buzz! The air was rippled with visible ripples, and a stream of light flashed by. Shenyu turned his body into a knife, penetrated through layers of gas explosions, and instantly sank into the woods. The trees broke and fell, and a huge knife mark was plowed out of the entire forest. The green light penetrated the forest directly, and crashed into the rocks 100 meters away with billowing smoke and dust. The smoke and dust slowly dissipated, revealing the situation inside. Shenyu maintained the posture of thrusting the knife straight, but Hashirama put his palms together, firmly fixed the blade, and the tip of the knife was only a few centimeters away from his lips, flashing an intimidating cold light. Shenyu raised the corner of his mouth, and his right hand slightly twisted the handle of the knife, and the blade flashed a green light. The dazzling knife light burst out from the tip of the knife. Hashirama slapped the blade as if he had predicted it, and avoided the sharp edge. The green light tore the earth and split the low mountain behind him into two. Hashirama took advantage of the situation and turned around to approach Shenyu. His right fist burst out with surging chakra flames, carrying the power of overwhelming mountains and seas, and rushed straight to Shenyu's chest. Before the fist arrived, the wind suddenly rose. Black air emerged, spreading rapidly like ink-stained rice paper, and instantly turned into an obsidian skeleton, covering Shenyu's whole body. Crack! After only a moment's pause, Hashirama's fist directly smashed Susanoo's ribs, like a high-speed train, with a whistling sound of wind, and hit Shenyu's chest hard. The sound was like thunder, and the ground under their feet was instantly shattered. The fist, wind wrapped in blue flames, swung across Shenyu's chest, emptying the waves, and the shock waves swept 100 meters. Shenyu smiled at the corner of his mouth. Not only did he not retreat half a step, but grabbed Hashirama's wrist. Is this a strange power? It's just like this. What? Hashirama was shocked in his heart, and the moment he looked at each other, he saw the boy's eyes flashing with bloodthirstiness. Shenyu's lower body was as stable as a mountain, sinking his shoulders and twisting his waist, and the monstrous power of a wild beast suddenly erupted, throwing the stunned Hashirama far away. Swish, swish, swish. He instantly slashed 12 times in the direction of Hashirama. In the dazzling green light, black air spread wildly, the skeleton reappeared, the bone arm and the sharp blade grew rapidly, a wisp of black flame burned along the sharp blade, and slashed out with the bone arm. The air explosion surrounded by black flames tore through the sea, chasing the 12 green sword chi through the air. Boom! The water waves rushed up to the sky, and the dazzling slash directly blasted Hashirama into the sea. The sea was surging. Seeing Hashirama being chopped and buried in the sea, Shenyu once again used the water barrier as a stepping stone. His body was like an arrow shot from a bow, and he shot into the sea with a whoosh sound. Wood style. Wood dragon technique. Bang! Shenyu was knocked out of the sea and thrown into the sky at a faster speed. A huge wooden dragon emerged from the sea, creating white foam, and its body was coiled and stretched, floating directly on the sea. Hashirama stood at the head of the dragon with his legs apart. He looked up at Shenyu, bowed slightly, and put his palms together, like a monk chanting sermons devoutly. Wood style. Chaos dragon technique. The wooden dragon roared, and its head expanded several times. With the sound of glag, it began to split from the head of the dragon and quickly turned into 5 identical wooden dragons. Go! Hashirama changed his hand seal, turned his palms upside down, and the air was filled with strange fluctuations. The 5 wooden dragons accelerated together, swirling around Shenyu who was rushing into the air. 5 pairs of yellow and orange eyes were as bright as golden lamps, drawing dazzling streams of light in the night sky. Come on, that's it. Shenyu stretched out his limbs in the air, looking at the roaring huge wooden dragon, with an excited blush on his face. His left eye kaleidoscope was spinning quietly, and the 5 wooden dragons were in full view. The pattern of the magic circle was glimmering, as if to imprint everything into his mind. While the wooden dragon was not approaching, he quickly swung out more than a dozen knives, and the green light flashed horizontally. The seemingly sharp sword energy could only leave a foot-deep mark on the wooden dragon. The knife marks were dense, but it did not stop the wooden dragon's momentum at all. So that's it, his eyes flashed with understanding. In the slow motion vision of the Mangekyō Sharingan, the green sword energy of autumn dew on leaves was rapidly fading in the gaps on the wooden dragon's body until it disappeared, and the chakra-like rippling water was also absorbed. The next second, 5 dragons roared in. The timing was very exquisite, just when Shenyu's kinetic energy returned to 0, and he was in freefall in midair and could not use force. However, Shenyu suddenly turned into a residual image and moved sideways, seemingly ignoring gravity. He stepped on the void, and ripples rippled with every step he took. After a few sideways flashes, he threw away all the dragons and swooped in front of Hashirama. Shenyu fell straight down, clearing the way with a flying sword. Hashirama slightly sideways to avoid it, and Frost's heart shone with brilliant green light, brushing against the dragon's head and flying past, and then fell into the shore with a swoosh, trembling non-stop. Shenyu's eyes were cold, and he landed on the dragon's head with a bang, and started a close combat with Hashirama again. Boom, boom, boom. There was no crisp sound of fists and palms colliding. Every time the two fought, it was like thunder. Fist against fist, palm against palm, it was a completely powerful and heavy bombardment. The air waves were rippling like tides, and even the dragon's head could not withstand the impact and slowly cracked. Hashirama's lower body was quite stable. He punched 3 inches away and 7 inches away. His hands and feet were wrapped in blazing chakra blue flames. This was the embodiment of the extreme practice of strange power. Shenyu was not so fancy. He performed a very pure tough guy boxing, long bridge and big horse, full of impact. The strange power punched to his chest, and he easily pushed away Hashirama's wrist. While bullying, he swung his left arm and gave the opponent a fierce, great sage pai gua. Hashirama's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't expect that this move would be so fast. Such a fierce attack reminded him of a familiar figure. At this moment, he had no time to defend himself, so he had to raise his foot and kick Shenyu's lower abdomen. The blue flames on his foot flashed, forcing the other party to withdraw his hand and dodge. After all, he did the same thing when he faced that person before. However, Shenyu didn't care and completely ignored his actions. His palm knife broke through the sound barrier and slashed at Hashirama's collarbone with an unstoppable momentum. With a crisp crack, the overwhelming impact surged in all directions. Hashirama's face flashed a ferocious look for a moment. The whole person was like a lone boat in a storm. He was smashed far away by the huge force, smashing 3 huge dragon bodies in succession, and shot straight into the sea, splashing water 100 feet high. On the other hand, Shenyu took a kick from Hashirama's strange power, and he only took 2 steps back. His face was not red and he was still standing steadily on the head of the wooden dragon, looking very relaxed. Speaking of which, his physical defense is far superior to his Susanoo, which is incredible. Hashirama's strange power can easily break his first-level Susanoo and penetrate the high-density protective water shield on the surface of his body, reaching his body directly, but in front of the terrifying Poseidon body, he can't even break the defense, and the power is dissolved before reaching the internal organs. The sea breeze brought Hashirama's low voice. Wood release. Tree world birth. A hint of green appeared on the sea, and then spread and expanded rapidly, countless the trees cut through the sea, like ancient trees uprooted. In an instant, a lush forest rose from the sea, like an island several thousand meters in radius. Hashirama was standing on the top of the tallest tree. He looked unharmed. Shenyu's attack did break his clavicle, but this injury was completely healed in just 3 seconds. That's right, Master Hashirama. Shenyu gently brushed his left eye and fell with the wooden dragon. While you can still burn, you must let me enjoy it. Hashirama raised his head and stared at him, with a flash of surprise in his eyes. You are different from any opponent I have ever seen. You actually have this kind of strength. Ban, is this the disciple you trained? Single quote. Shenyu quickly formed a seal, closed his palms and slowly pulled them apart. In the distorted air, a ball of dark flames burned. He made a bow and arrow action, and the black flames turned into burning arrows, aiming at Hashirama from a distance. Flame style. Kagutsuchi arrow. Swoosh. The arrow suddenly shrank, pierced through the air, and disappeared instantly. Can't let the flames fall to the ground. Hashirama frowned, clapped his hands, and the vines in the sea of trees intertwined, and suddenly raised a big hand formed by countless giant trees and grabbed towards the sky. Wood style. All cloth bags. Fire seal. The black arrow hit the palm, and the air suddenly rippled. The expected situation of piercing the wooden palm did not occur. The huge wooden palm shone brightly, and dense sealing techniques lit up in the palm lines. The condensed black arrow suddenly began to disintegrate into black flowing flames, which were quickly swallowed by the techniques. As the wooden palm slowly tightened, the high temperature and flames were completely absorbed and disappeared. Taking advantage of this gap, the divine feather fell from the sky, smashing into the sea of trees with huge kinetic energy, and the entire island trembled slightly. He didn't waste words. His figure flashed, the air vibrated violently, and a milky white sound cone appeared behind him. He easily broke through the sound barrier. The same white sound cone flashed behind Hashirama, and the speed was evenly matched. The two collided at the speed of sound. Boom! The air wave swept 1,000 meters, and the two fought again. One burst out with surging chakra blue flames, and his every move was full of power. The other's body seemed to be cast in divine iron, fierce and unmatched, like a god or demon descending to the world, and the whole sea was rolling up with angry waves. Hashirama could break through the water molecule barrier with one punch, and the strange force penetrated the flesh directly. However, except for the dull sound of the blow, he could not receive any feedback and did not cause effective damage to Shenyu's body. On the other hand, Shenyu's fist was wrapped in fierce and domineering strength. Without any skills, it was pure brute force, which could easily tear Hashirama's muscles and cause internal injuries, but under the opponent's abnormal recovery ability, it was useless. For a while, the battle fell into a strange stalemate. Current stage, Uchiha Shenyu character panel. Physique. Body of the sea god invulnerable to swords and guns, infinite strength, 60 Mach extreme swimming speed, 30 Mach moving speed, body breathing, ultra-long visual range, extreme water control, chakra ultra-frequency wave detection. Magnetic field induction can sense the magnetic field of the universe in a certain atmosphere, understand the distribution of the magnetic field, and then monitor the distribution and changes of charged particles in space, including but not limited to ultra-distance induction, mind control, insight into space. Talent. Fine control of chakra. The mind moves at will, like an arm, easily simulates the flow of water with chakra, can superimpose and compress its density, condense-like substance. Excellent nerve reaction ability, body coordination ability. He could react to Flying Thunder God at the age of 7, and in the battle between him and Tobirama in the Valley of the End, he used the hollow to adapt to Flying Thunder God, which caused his nerve reflexes to be slow, and Tobirama got the rhythm. Bloodline limit. Mangekyō Sharingan, dynamic observation, ninjutsu, physical technique copy, illusion hypnosis. Flame escape Kagutsuchi no Mitsu no Ya, flame blade, flame thunder god. Eye technique. Hollow, Ten no Yori, Susanoo, 3rd level, Dujian Arahato, Izanagi. Secret technique. Autumn dew on leaves, blue sword chi. Forbidden technique. Spiritualization technique, instantaneous thousands of miles, hallucination field, soul search copy, soul suppression, soul obliteration. Ninjutsu. Mastery of fire style, mastery of instant body style, water clone style, and other 5 elements styles. Physical technique. Uchiha style swordsmanship, physical techniques taught by Madara, 8 gates of ninjutsu, 6th Kajimon. Illusion technique. Magic puppet technique, magic shackle technique, magic shiranui, magic mirror world transformation. On the island on the sea, 2 figures collided brazenly, and the collision of fists and palms was like thunder. The 5th Duman open. Shen Yu's hair suddenly flew up, and he shouted loudly, shaking the entire sea area with layers of waves. His figure rose from the ground, leaving a long tail of hot flames in the air. He charged in mid-air, kicked out from a distance, and his figure rubbed against the air at high speed, burning hot flames, like a falling meteor hitting Hashirama. Lee. The air hissed, the sound moved the 9 heavens, the red flames faintly outlined the burning wings, and the sonic boom suddenly swayed, spreading the prototype of a huge firebird. Chongming. The blazing fire illuminated Hashirama's solemn face. His eyelids jumped, and a solemnity that he had never had before flashed in his eyes. He immediately clasped his hands together. Wood release. Ranking technique. The sea of trees under his feet was wriggling like water waves, and 6 heavy-colored, huge shields like iron birch wood rose up slowly, wrapping the pillars layer by layer, like armor, tightly fastened one after another. Shen Yu turned into a double-headed bird, dragging a long stream of flames, piercing through the layers of air, and instantly smashed on the pillar's shield. Boom! The shield exploded instantly, the entire island sank slightly, the sea water churned back, and the raging flames mixed with the air waves swept 1,000 meters. The wind suddenly rose, the mist was steaming, and this kick directly shattered the island. The broken wood was scattered all over the sky with the shock wave, and the sea surface was rippling, and it could not calm down for a long time. In the surging sea, 2 figures shot out together and crashed directly into the coastal cliffs. Shen Yu's body was red, his veins were exposed, and wild green steam came out from his limbs, like a yaksha wearing a Nuo mask. He grabbed Hashirama with one hand and threw him into the mountain. Pa! A slender hand grabbed Hashirama's cheek and pressed him against the stone wall and rubbed him wildly. Wherever he passed, the rocks exploded. Shen Yu turned around and threw, gathering his energy into a blade, and added 2 huge slashes, blasting Hashirama into the cliff. Bang bang! Hashirama's body was divided into 4 pieces, and before it fell to the ground, it turned into a lifelike wooden sculpture, making a crisp sound. Shen Yu turned around silently, looking at the figure rushing out of the sea, and moved his feet, and instantly collided with this person. Hashirama's face was solemn. He didn't expect Shen Yu to be so powerful. With only the 5th gate of the 8 gates of ninjutsu, he could directly crush his ranking technique. His move can even defend against the explosion of the tailed beast ball of the power Susanoo. Shen Yu's attack was as fast as lightning, and Hashirama was unable to keep up with his speed. All his attacks fell into his opponent's eyes. The combination of the dynamic vision of the kaleidoscope level, the extreme speed, and the powerful strength brought the peak of physical skills, the human-shaped Tyrannosaurus. Every punch and kick of Shen Yu rubbed against the air to produce dazzling flames, and the overwhelming force almost shattered his internal organs. Now he is only supported by the powerful self-healing ability of the immortal body. Wood release. Hashirama looked stunned, and his clasped palms were forcibly separated by the yaksha-like boy, and then a piercing knee hit him hard into the ground. I'm tired of red tape. The gravel was scattered, the dust was flying, and this hard land formed entirely of reefs seemed to be no different from the water in Shenyu's eyes. Wood style. Violent spear tree. Bleeding from Hashirama's teeth, he shouted, and countless wooden vines and branches instantly grew behind him. A towering tree rose from the ground and knocked Shenyu out. Shenyu turned back in midair, with ripples behind him, and he killed again. The trees spread, and what greeted him were hundreds of Hashirama's wood-style shadow clones. Shenyu started the killing mode. He was in the fifth Duman state, and even Hashirama himself could only be suppressed, not to mention these clones. Fist force spurted out, and the flames reappeared. Autumn dew on leaves, chopped and chopped horizontally. Every blow would smash dozens of wood-style clones to pieces. He turned into a human-shaped dump truck and repeatedly crushed among a pile of clones. Flame style. Flame thunder god. Shenyu opened his hands, black flames boiled under his feet, and hundreds of flame spears stabbed out at the same time, piercing through all the clones. In just a few breaths, he eliminated all the wood-style clones. ZZ. Shenyu slid on the last wooden sculpture and slid slowly to the side of a divine sword. At this time, a loud shout from Hashirama sounded behind him. Wood style. Woodman technique. The tree roots danced wildly, the giant trees collapsed, and a huge wooden man rose from the ground, with a green face and fangs, and a wooden dragon wrapped around his shoulders. Hashirama's real body stood on the wooden man's head, coming fiercely. Shenyu seemed unaware and pulled out the frost heart by himself, then he turned around slowly. The night was like a curtain, the sound of waves was violent, the young man spread his legs, his trousers fluttered in the sea breeze, he faced the huge wooden man, and the god of ninja world, on the wooden man's head, with the unsheathed divine sword in his hand. No words were needed, he moved his footsteps, his figure rushed out like a sharp arrow, and the red light of the Mangekyō Sharingan was pulled into two long streams at a very fast speed. The wooden man swung his fist violently, like a King Kong with angry eyes, the huge fist pierced through the air, and collided fiercely with Shenyu's chi blast slash. At this moment, Shenyu exerted his speed to the extreme, and there were afterimages in all directions. Countless identical figures attacked the wooden man's head at the same time, and sharp green rays continued. The wooden man roared, the sword light flew, and the place where the two fought seemed to have turned into a meat grinder. The giant's punch could directly smash the earth, and the occasional flash of sword energy could easily cut the cliff. Boom boom boom. The rocks exploded continuously, and the aftermath alone could seriously injure ordinary cage-level warriors. Suddenly, black air roared and swirled, and a skeleton took shape in an instant. The ink-colored airflow was like a dancing cloak. Shenyu opened Susanoo to the third level in one breath, and blood immediately flowed from his eyes. Crow Tengu Susanoo was short and fat, and was already a behemoth compared to ordinary people, but in front of the nearly 200-meter-tall wooden man, it seemed insignificant. But it waved its hand, and black streams of light gathered in its palm, and instantly turned into a domineering spear. The spear was straight, dark as the abyss, and the ancient and solemn golden lines wrapped around the spear, extending all the way to the tip of the spear. Divine Artifact Dujian Wangbatu. Shenyu did not stand in Susanoo, but jumped out of the black mist, and his third-level Susanoo killed the wooden man on the left and right respectively. The spear swept across with great force, hitting the wooden man's knee. Shenyu took advantage of the moment when the wooden man was shaking, and the Kagutsuchi no Makoto shot into the sky, narrowly grazing Hashirama's right face. Hashirama's eyes condensed, and the wooden man immediately turned around and swung his fist, which came with overwhelming momentum. Susanoo held the spear horizontally with four hands, taking a defensive posture. Boom! The violent air wave spread in a circle, and with a loud bang, the earth suddenly shook and collapsed. Shenyu stood in the storm, the silk pattern did not move, but he frowned slightly. It was just a punch, Dujian Wangbatu was not damaged at all, but his arm, a third-level Susanoo, had already developed spider web-like cracks. Shenyu used the third-level Susanoo to contain the attack of the wooden man, and he was also looking for an opportunity to attack Hashirama with every move. The wooden man was fierce, and a pair of strong fists suppressed the black Susanoo and forced it to retreat again and again. The armor of Crow Tengu was torn into pieces, but fortunately, relying on the power of the artifact, it could still withstand a few moves. When there was no way to avoid it, Shenyu took the opportunity to attack, and the sword light flashed. While containing Hashirama, it also slightly buffered the danger of Susanoo. As the battle time continued to accumulate, Shenyu's left eye was bleeding, and bloodstains had already covered his side face. The adaptation process of Magic Luo has been continuing. Swish! The two huge sword energies were easily crushed by the wooden man, and Shenyu was found by Hashirama and punched into the mountain. During the backward flight, his Mangekyō pattern finally turned the last time. Wood escape, adaptation, completed. A hint of joy flashed across Shenyu's face, and then he smashed through the cliff, leaving a 100-meter mark on the ground before he stopped. He quickly stood up and felt the changes in himself. Wood escape. There are 3 chakra attributes that make up it, namely, water escape, earth escape, and the most critical, yang escape. Water is for moisture, earth is for nourishment, and yang is for life. It is with the blessing of the sage body of Senju Hashirama and the huge amount of chakra that his wood escape is so strong. This also explains why Yamato in the original time and space, even if he has Hashirama cells and can perform wood escape, his achievements are far inferior to Hashirama. The problem of chakra is only one aspect, the most critical is the pure and vigorous vitality. When Yamato, who carries Hashirama's cells, meets the product of the sacred tree, White Zetsu, his chakra and yang escape chakra are filled, and his wood escape can slightly show the style of the first generation. But the low-profile version is the low-profile version, and it is still a million miles away from the current Hashirama. All of Hashirama's wood release ninjutsu can continuously absorb the enemy's chakra in battle to strengthen himself, which is almost catching up with the legendary, sacred tree. Shenyu's autumn dew on leaves is restrained by this move, so it is constrained everywhere and cannot be effective. In this regard, the optimization plan given by Makoro is greatly strengthen Shenyu's chakra fine operation ability, improve it to a perverted level, and provide him with a very special operation method. Fine and meticulous, reconstruct chakra particles from a microscopic perspective, modify chakra density according to the atomic arrangement of metals, recompress chakra and condense it again, thus giving it the attribute of gold. The essence of wood is inherent, with the characteristics of growth, softness, flexibility and stretching, and comfort. The texture of gold is heavy and often used for killing. It has the properties of sedimentation, killing, convergence, etc., representing the kinetic energy of gathering. The 5 elements are mutually generated and restrained. Only the sharp and killing gold can restrain the straight and flexible wood. Shenyu was very surprised that Moxu Luo actually used the principle of the mutual generation and restraint of the small 5 elements to analyze the wood escape. This was something he had not expected. Without further ado, he raised his hand and grabbed it in the air. With a flash of light, autumn dew on the leaves turned into a jade green long sword in his hand. Gathering of gold, reshaping and reshaping. Following the special feeling, Shenyu's mind moved. Under his operation of rebuilding chakra, autumn dew on the leaves was undergoing a revolutionary transformation. The long sword shrank hundreds of times in an instant, not even as big as his fingertips, but in Shenyu's insightful vision, the interior of this mini long sword was completely different from the original. In addition to being smaller, the appearance is still transparent jade green, but it exudes a strong metallic luster from the inside out. The chakra inside was still flowing like a stream, but the arrangement of the chakra was tight and stable, and it was closely connected according to the structure of metal atoms, and the overall density was strengthened by nearly 1,000 times. The novel was taken from the Raleigh's website. Close where you're reading it and support us on our website for more free novels. The ground shook violently, and the wooden man of the pillar was pinching the neck of the black Susanoo and running wildly, and it was about to crush it into pieces. Shenyu had no time to observe carefully, and his right pupil turned slightly, and he moved 1,000 meters in an instant, returning to the position before he was knocked away. He injected chakra into the mini knife in his right hand, and his whole body suddenly shook. Autumn dew on the leaves seemed to be a bottomless black hole, madly devouring his chakra. In just 1 second, This long sword with sharp light flowing all over it, like an emerald crystal, returned to its original size. Autumn dew on the leaves, golden armor. Shen Yu swung a knife at the wooden man, and a heavy and solid, sharp and unparalleled knife light flashed through the air, leaving a dark blue knife mark. There was a snap sound, like the sound of paper being cut. Hashirama looked back in shock, and one of the wooden man's forearms fell to the ground. The cut was neat and smooth like a mirror. What is this? In addition to being shocked, Hashirama quickly made a response. The hand seal changed, the wooden dragon roared and rushed towards Shenyu, and the wooden man under his feet bent his knees and jumped, and a fierce, war trampling, went straight to Susanoo's forehead. Shenyu swung his sword and chopped it vertically, and the slender blade light flashed, and the huge wooden dragon stopped abruptly. The sea breeze blew, and the wooden dragon was directly divided into two pieces and fell to the ground with a bang. At the same time, Shenyu's right eye turned gently like a gear. Silently, the hill-like Susanoo disappeared out of thin air and appeared strangely behind the wooden man, with the cold light flashing on the tip of the spear until the back of the heart of the pillar. Shenyu took the opportunity to activate the heaven's constant standing, backtracking state. The magic weapon like autumn dew on the leaves had dissipated. Although this move containing the golden killing blow was powerful, the consumption was really terrible. With his current chakra level, he could only swing 2 swords, and then he had to go back immediately, otherwise he would fall into a weak period. Reconstructing chakra also requires a considerable amount of mental energy. With a crisp explosion, the spear was thrown out violently, the white sound cone swung out from the end of the spear, and the black gold streamer flashed by and instantly nailed the back of the wooden man's head. At this moment, the blazing flames rose into the night sky around Shenyu's body, and the flames exploded in the sky, as if there were wings spread there, and he turned into a streamer and killed. Chongming reappeared. Li. He kicked the end of the spear, and the terrifying kinetic energy was transmitted along the spear body to the tip of the spear, and with a click, it penetrated the wooden man's head. However, Hashirama himself was not hit by the spear tip. At the last moment, he once again performed would release burst spear technique, and his right arm turned into a giant tree, pushing himself away. The wooden man punched and killed, even if the head was still pierced with Dojian Wangbatu, it still did not lose the ability to move. A smile passed across the corner of Shenyu's lips, and he lightly raised his sword finger. In an instant, the Dojian Wangbatu hummed loudly, the golden pattern on the gun body shone brightly, the magic circle was activated, and the gravity within a radius of hundreds of meters was pushed up to 50 times. Hashirama looked stunned. In an instant, he felt that he was out of touch with the surrounding environment. The ground came with a huge suction force that was difficult to resist. He was directly pressed on the head of the wooden man, with one knee touching the ground, unable to move at all. His facial features were distorted, and he felt that every inch of flesh and blood, every bone in his body had become his enemy, and was frantically breaking through the constraints of his body and rushing into the bottomless abyss. Hashirama tried his best to raise his head, and his spine made a creaking sound under the heavy load. He was bearing an unimaginable force, power beyond intelligence. Crack, crack. The wooden man stopped moving immediately, his knees shattered, and his huge body tilted and collapsed. It's the power of that gun. As long as it leaves a certain range, it can get rid of this strange gravity. A firm look flashed in Hashirama's eyes. He closed his eyes, and in an instant, rich natural energy gathered in every cell of his body like a whale drinking. When he opened his eyes, his face was covered with crisscrossing facial lines. Sage mode, opened in seconds. Chapter 71. Ah! Hashirama shouted loudly. He was no longer the same as before after entering the sage mode. With the blessing of the sage chakra, his body had surpassed the limit of living things. His aura changed, and the mighty pressure swept all around. He stood up slowly with 50 times the gravity. The next second, the air twisted slightly, and Shenyu came to his back like a ghost, and the blade merged into the wind, slashing towards Hashirama's neck. Swish! Hashirama turned sideways flexibly, and the sword energy shining with a thick metallic luster flashed and cut off half of the wooden man's head. Bang! While turning sideways, Hashirama took advantage of the situation and spun around with his left foot as the axis, hitting Shenyu's chest with a clean and neat roundhouse kick. The surging strange power suddenly erupted, and Shenyu flew backwards at a speed that directly broke through the sound barrier, like a cannonball, smashing through 3 mountains in succession. Hashirama bent down and hugged Duji and Wongbatu, with both hands, like a king carrying a tripod. With a deep shout, the surging chakra flames ignited his whole body. His feet stepped into the top of the wooden man's head with a crackling sound, and the huge gun body was lifted up by him and thrown into the distance with a boom. Then, he clasped his hands together, and the wooden man with only half of his head was restored to his ability to move. He punched out and shattered the black Susanoo that had recondensed the artifact. Hashirama was panting heavily. Natural energy strengthened his physical fitness dozens of times. Whether it was strength, speed, defense, or recovery ability, they all made a qualitative leap, but in return, his vitality was rapidly consumed. As he said before, now he is really using his broken body to ignite a raging fire. He originally had a few years of life left, but it is about to run out. Even so, I will light up a bright future for the children. He couldn't help but recall Shenyu's crazy look before the war, and a certain emotion in his eyes became more determined. Whether it's Madara or you, as long as you are the enemy of the village, I will bury you with my own hands. Senjutsu would release Flower Tree World Advent. Countless thick tree roots cut the surface of the earth, and the sound of graglag continued. One by one, thick giant trees rose and spread, like the rising tide, with waves rolling. Shenyu just broke out of the mountain and was submerged by countless giant vines. In just a few breaths, a dense forest rose within a radius of 6,000 meters. The ground shook violently, and as huge flowers bloomed, the thick yellow pollen spread rapidly with the whistling sea breeze, and in a blink of an eye, it spread across the entire coast. This is the Flower Tree World Birth that combines fairy arts. The toxicity of the pollen is even stronger. Ordinary people will faint in an instant if they inhale a trace amount. Even the tailed beast can be knocked down directly within 3 breaths. A dark blue stream of light flashed in the night sky, and the forest within a radius of several hundred meters fell down like wheat being cut. A figure flew out from the smoke and dust mixed with pollen, standing lightly on the top of the tree. Hashirama was slightly stunned. Shenyu was not only fine, but also took a deep breath in the poisonous smoke. Shenyu exhaled a light yellow smoke ring, floating in the air, covered with clouds and mist. Is this the Flower Tree World Birth? He was a little excited, and 2 blushes climbed up his pretty cheeks. It's really awesome. The air seemed to be still, and Hashirama was a little dumbfounded for a while. What kind of physical fitness is this? This kid, no, where did Madara dig this unlucky thing from? In fact, Shenyu's cells can control the process of gas passing through the cell membrane, which is directly controlled by subjective consciousness and only absorbs oxygen. This is the same whether it is oral or nasal breathing or body breathing. Therefore, if he wants, he can completely ignore the pollen. He jumped on the spot, and the ground exploded instantly. Hashirama only saw a black shadow shooting straight into the night sky, causing ripples. Suddenly, a meteor streaked across the sky. Hashirama turned back suddenly, and the red fire lit up his eyes. The air was vibrating, and it seemed that even the brain was trembling. The red wings swept back, and the firebird reappeared. Does he have no limits? Hashirama's face was solemn. This move was enough to destroy the physical technique of the ranking technique. He had seen it 3 times. But he did not retreat at all. The wooden man roared, lowered his shoulders and gathered strength, and the rich fairy chakra filled his whole body, like an indestructible diamond, and raised his fist to meet it. Shenyu. The firebird fell, like a meteorite from outer space. A streak of light flashed, and then a huge explosion resounded through the world. The mountains collapsed, the earth cracked, the waves emptied, and the powerful shock wave swept across thousands of meters, and large tracts of forests were destroyed in the storm. On the reef a little further away, a figure appeared out of thin air. As soon as Uchiha Jing appeared, he was attracted by the earth-shaking battle. He stared blankly at the wooden man, and the 2 figures fighting fiercely on top of the wooden man, could not believe his eyes. Brother, has he become so powerful? He was shocked and murmured, that's the sage mode of Hashirama. A few minutes ago, he used the Flying Thunder God technique to rush to a coastal town in the land of hot springs. Following the memory in his mind, He found a gambling house with ease, went straight to the second floor, and saw the baby Tsunade in the cradle, and a blue cat. Why are you here at this time? Overtime. Overtime also counts as money. I must extort this kid later. Pochi glanced at him, muttered and turned into blue mist and dissipated. Jing did not dare to hesitate, and immediately teleported back to Konoha village with Princess Tsunade in his arms. Seeing him return, Tobirama was as if he was facing a great enemy. The murderous intent emanating from inside and outside made Jing stunned. Until he explained the matter, Tobirama confirmed his identity through perception, and then he was relieved. He immediately arranged people to protect Tsunade, and then confirmed the situation of Hashirama and Shenyu through him. Jing, I should have taught you to keep the habit of leaving the Flying Thunder God mark at all times, right? Single quote. Yes, teacher. Single quote. Then, Tobirama said, leaving his own Flying Thunder God mark on Jing's body, take me to the battlefield. Single quote. With a loud boom, the airwaves rolled out, pulling Jing's thoughts back to reality. In the Sage mode, Hashirama was surrounded by chakra flames. The strange power that was already able to break mountains and split rocks became more domineering under the blessing of the fairy chakra. Shenyu still maintained the state of fifth Duman, and the blue steam was diffused and rising. Every blow rubbed against the air to produce dazzling flames, which was overwhelming. The occasional flash of dark blue sword energy, even Hashirama could only dodge, and did not dare to take it head on. Two streams of light, one blue and one green, fought back and forth, punching each other, and the sound of thunder-like collision was terrifying. Suddenly, Shen Yu, who was fighting, raised his eyes suddenly, and the fierce light in his eyes flashed. He ignored the Hashirama in front of him and let the opponent's fist fall on his face. He swung his right hand, and accompanied by a piercing sonic boom, Frost's heart disappeared without a trace. Jing's hair stood up, and a chill rushed from his heels to his head. Ordinary ninjas may not be able to see what happened, but in the field of vision of the Sharingan, a slender divine sword was piercing through the sound waves, breaking through the air like a thunderbolt from heaven. He subconsciously wanted to use the Flying Thunder God technique to jump away, but the space behind him suddenly shook, and a familiar white-haired figure quietly appeared. Not good. Jing's pupils suddenly contracted, and he shouted in horror, "Teacher, hurry up!" It was too late. The knife that foresaw pierced his chest the moment Tobirama appeared. Puff! The intense pain made Tobirama's eyes widen instantly, and bloodshot pupils. With a complex expression of astonishment and pain, he was led by the long sword all the way forward, breaking through several reefs in succession, and nailed to the cliff with a bang. In the field, after Hashirama blasted Shenyu away with a punch, he also obviously noticed the situation in the distance. Tobirama. His heart twitched slightly, but reason told him that he could not look back and could not be distracted. After turning on the Sage mode, he could not only rely on the perception of the Sage mode to deal with attacks, but also use the natural energy around him to fight, and he fought back and forth with this monster. But this is not what he wants. Shinyu has completely fallen into darkness. If I continue to fight, I will probably lose. If I let him go, who knows how many people will be like Tobirama in the future. He made up his mind and let out a long breath. Let's give it a try. Hashirama put his hands together as usual, like a monk in meditation, but the chilling murderous intent in his eyes was like a Shira who was destroying the world. Immortal technique. Wood release, true thousand hands. The majestic breath surged like a tsunami. Under the feet of Hashirama, white rays of light pierced the earth. Giant trees collapsed, waves of sound rolled, and dust was raised all over the sky. Along with Hashirama's roar, a huge Buddha 1,000 meters high rose from the ground. Countless wooden hands were densely embedded behind the wooden Buddha, stretching as far as the eye could see, heavy and solid, with a strong sense of oppression. Under the moonlight, the figure of the Buddha covered the night sky, and the huge shadow directly covered the entire coast. Facing the huge and boundless 1,000-armed wooden Buddha, Shenyu raised his head high and saw the figure standing on the Buddha's head with the moonlight above his head, like a god. Master Madara, is this what you faced back then? He smiled and shook his head. No, what you faced back then must be stronger than this. Never mind, this is exactly what I want. He crossed his hands and made a gesture of accumulating power. The surging chakra flowed through the meridians in his body, his black hair moved without wind, and the surrounding gravel floated and sank with his breathing. That was a huge force rising. This was obviously just a very simple move, but the moment it was made, the space within a radius of hundreds of feet was stagnant, the sea breeze, the waves, the swaying branches and leaves, everything became slow. On his body, an invisible force covered all directions, covering the sky and the sun. The deep night sky was covered with dark clouds, making Jing in the distance hold his breath. He was trying to get close to Tobirama. Jing had to pause and cast a frightened look at Shen Yu. 8 gates of ninja, 6th gate of Jing, open. Shen Yu spread his arms and roared. The rich green air exploded like a bomb, and the mountains roared and the sea roared. The terrifying aura rushed straight into the sky, tearing the dark clouds into pieces. From a distance, it seemed as if a huge green lotus was blooming there. Shen Yu jumped into the air. At this moment, there was no water molecule condensed under his feet. He really stepped on the void and stood in the air. After being promoted to the Poseidon body, his progress in practicing the 8 gates of ninja became extremely slow. The meridians that could be easily opened before are now as solid as a rock. He has to work thousands of times harder than ordinary people to open this forbidden door. Of course, the benefits are worth it. The reason is that the strength of his current 6th gate of Jing has exceeded that of Might Guy, who opened the 8th death gate in the original time and space. The Buddha on the top. Hashirama roared, and the 1,000-handed wooden Buddha under his feet lowered his eyes, with compassion in his eyes, determined to subdue the demon in front of him. Endless giant palms surged, covering the sky and the moon, unstoppable, and simply crushed everything. Just the palm wind blew a strong wind and cracked the rocks. Shen Yu quickly punched out. The sonic boom sounded like thunder, and the huge air cannon pierced through, instantly crushing several wooden Buddha giant palms. The speed of this attack was extremely fast, and the power was far beyond Chongming. He did not stop punching. After images appeared, and a whirlwind suddenly rose on the flat ground. His fists were too fast to be captured by the naked eye. One after another, powerful air cannons were like machine guns firing continuously, facing the endless palms. Evening Elephant 81 consecutive quick attacks. Shen Yu roared to the sky, his black hair dancing wildly, like a god or demon, and in just 3 breaths, he completed the 81 consecutive attacks. Light burst, wood fragments flew. However, the attack of the wooden Buddha seemed like a surging river. The waves were not over, but one after another. Countless huge palms once again submerged Shen Yu's figure. Shen Yu stepped on the air and shot towards the huge Buddha in vain. Just like the beautiful boy Ikaros in Greek mythology, he opened his arms without hesitation, facing the rain of fire in the dark, as if he wanted to embrace the non-existent sun, intoxicated by its flames, and was not afraid of falling due to the high temperature burning his wings. Boom boom boom. The sky and the earth lost their color, the roar resounded through the sky, the ground was cracked, and the circular storm pushed thousands of feet with the wooden Buddha as the center. The storm was unstoppable. Uchiha Jing in the distance was like a leaf that rose and fell with the wind, and was blown directly to Tobirama and hit the reef. Hashirama was panting heavily. He didn't know how much strength he had left. All his attention was focused on the gradually dissipating dust. Da, da, da. Light footsteps were heard in the thick smoke, and a slender figure slowly appeared. Is this the magic? You are worthy of being the god of ninja. In the past 6 years, this is the first time someone has hurt me so badly. Shen Yu smiled calmly and had already withdrawn from the state of 6th Jingmun. His injuries were not serious, but he looked a little embarrassed. His clothes were tattered, his black hair was messy, there was no blood on his body, and his left arm was irregularly bent. His face was bruised, but his eyes were still bright as usual. Before he could return to his state, his head was suddenly covered by a shadow, the wind was howling, and a huge Torii gate smashed him to the ground. Magic Mingshin Gate. Bang, 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 bang. 5 dark red Torii gates fell from the sky one after another, smashing Shen Yu into the dust. This is all I can do. Hashirama looked dazed, his body swayed, and he fell from the wooden Buddha with a thump. He struggled to get up, looking at Shen Yu, who was firmly suppressed by the Myojin gate. The awe in his eyes eased a little, like a melting iceberg. Tobirama said that the battle must not stop for a moment, and there should be no time for him to breathe. Myojin Gate can seal chakra and suppress all living things, so he can't use his pupil technique. Somehow, his heart suddenly felt empty, and he looked at the night sky in a state of loss. Madara, I will protect my village until the last moment. Shish. Hashirama's pupils shrank, and he looked down in astonishment, looking at the green light blade that pierced his chest, and, wow, coughed out a large mouthful of blood. He looked up tremblingly, and the figure under the torii was turning into a pool of clear water and sinking into the earth. I am returning this blow to you on behalf of Lord Madara. Shen Yu said softly. I am also a ninja, and this is how ninjas fight. Behind Hashirama, Shen Yu slowly drew out his light blade. His limbs were normal, and his previous embarrassment was completely gone. With the next knife, he aimed at the neck. The compatriots of Konoha are all part of my body. The people in the village believe in me, and I believe in everyone. What? Shen Yu frowned, not hearing what Hashirama was saying. I will pin my dreams on the distant future, and you, Hashirama said weakly, go to hell and repent. He shouted, squeezed out the last bit of strength from his whole body, turned around with all his strength, and punched Shen Yu in the chest. This punch condensed the entire will of the god of ninja, and gathered all the fairy chakra. It was the last swan song of his life. The huge force actually broke through the defense of the Poseidon body, and the force penetrated the bones, causing Shen Yu's internal organs to shift. Shen Yu coughed up blood and flew backwards, turning into a straight line, and this direction was exactly where Jing was at the moment. He had just run to Tobarama and pulled out the Frost Heart. The distance of 1,000 meters passed in an instant, and Jing felt a flash in front of his eyes, and a person flew in front of him. Puff! Jing stared blankly at the face close at hand, the strange and embarrassed face, and was a little at a loss for a moment. It was not until a touch of warmth flowed through his wrist that he saw his trembling hands and the knife that pierced his brother's heart. You have worked hard over the years, brother. Shen Yu's head was weakly supported on Jing's shoulder, whispering in his ear. Familiar words, familiar tone, familiar warmth, pulled his thoughts back to yesterday. On the Hokage Rock, in a corner where no one cared, a person accompanied him to talk, to watch the stars with him, and to look at the prosperous Konoha with him. That was the first time in so many years that he felt less lonely. So, it's you. Jing took several steps back, looking at his brother lying on the ground in horror, his facial features twisted little by little, and his expression gradually became crazy. In the distance, Hashirama looked at Shen Yu's body and could no longer hold on. The facial lines representing Sage Mode slowly disappeared, like a falling sunset. He fell back limply and closed his eyes tiredly. Jing couldn't believe what he saw in front of him. He stepped back uncontrollably, instinctively wanting to escape from it all, until he could no longer retreat and his back hit the rock. No, 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 I killed my brother. He looked at his bloody hands, and his eyes were dark red, which was the blood and tears that blurred his vision. Jing, chop off his head and gouge out his eyes. In the distance, the weak Tobarama suddenly spoke. Jing, who was about to collapse, was suddenly stunned. What did he hear? The teacher who had always been the most respected, not only watched him kill his brother with his own eyes, but also let him torture his corpse. Hurry up! Tobarama covered his chest, where blood was gushing out. His voice was weak and urgent. Hurry up and do it. Jing looked at his teacher blankly, then at his brother, hesitant and at a loss. Should I do it? Why? I don't even know why he left the village that year. I still don't understand what the will of Madara he insisted on is. I still don't know why he is against Konoha. I don't know what he has experienced in these years. Is he living well? I don't understand why he has let me go again and again. It turns out, I don't understand him so well. He obviously doesn't understand anything, but he still shamelessly stands in the sun to judge others, judges his own brother. It's so ugly. If I could talk to him earlier and understand everything about him earlier, perhaps the ending would not be so tragic. Until the end, I killed him with my own hands. He was so powerful that he was fine even when facing Hashirama. Why did he die in his own hands? Why should I kill him? I am the one who has no right to do it. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. The extreme coldness swept in all directions, and the cold and piercing chakra burst out. In the unbelievable eyes of Tobarama, Jing opened a pair of blood-red eyes. As the bloodshot crawled all over the pupils, the tails of the three Magatama gradually lengthened and connected together. The ink-colored patterns expanded outward and finally changed into a fixed shape, like a slender clover. Mangekyō Sharingan. Tobirama opened his mouth wide, and for the first time in his life, he lost his composure. Something beyond his understanding appeared. His face was as pale as lime. He didn't know whether it was because of pain or fear. Suddenly, Jing trembled, and a moment of astonishment flashed across his face, and then he returned to nature. All emotions were withdrawn from his eyes, leaving only the heart was as calm as still water. Tobirama's throat rolled and he opened his mouth, but before he could ask, he saw Jing shooting a kunai at him. A breeze moved, and a large hand appeared out of thin air as fast as thunder, with two fingers extended far away, reaching in front of the newly born Mangekyō Sharingan eyes. Swish! Jing disappeared out of thin air and appeared beside Tobirama, catching the kunai with one hand and resting the other hand on Tobirama's shoulder. Shenyu missed and looked at his brother with some surprise. His left eye had turned into a gloomy white. And his body had already turned into crystal light and dissipated, like a bubble that collapsed in the sun, leaving no trace. Why? Puzzled eyes flashed in Jing's eyes, and the blood and tears on his cheeks had not yet dried. Why do you do this? Of course it's for you, brother. Shenyu tilted his head and smiled. The lines on his right pupil rotated like a clock, and the injuries on his body were restored to their original state in the distorted moonlight. Chakra quickly recovered, and the pale and empty left eye also bloomed with a strange red light again. Everything before was for this moment. He deliberately took that punch from Hashirama. The direction of being repelled was adjusted. Even the knife that pierced his heart was only effective when he secretly attached autumn dew on the leaves' golden armor to the blade. I didn't expect that your movements were so fast. It seems that the Mangekyō Sharingan has made you a lot stronger. As soon as the voice fell, he saw a flash of afterimage, and he appeared in front of Jing again, and his slender big hand grabbed Jing's head. Silently, Jing activated the Flying Thunder God technique again, and disappeared with Tobirama. What happened? Shenyu frowned. His normal speed was enough to beat most of the cage-level strongmen in the ninja world, but he was easily avoided by this brother who had just opened the Mangekyō Sharingan twice in a row. At this moment, he suddenly raised his eyes, and 100 meters away came in an instant. His right hand stretched out like lightning and grabbed a certain void. He grabbed a figure out of thin air, and his big hand tightly pinched Uchiha Jing's neck, as if he had pulled it out of space. Stupid, you must always record the opponent's intelligence during the battle. You will never learn it. Shenyu sneered and raised his left hand, stabbing Jing's eyes. Jing coughed and his face turned red. He stared at the fingers that were getting closer and closer without blinking, and a smile suddenly crossed his mouth. Actually, I have learned it. With a bang, he turned into white smoke and dissipated. Shadow clone. Shenyu frowned. At the moment of distraction, Uchiha Jing suddenly appeared from the other side, which was exactly where Tobirama was just now. He had already left the Flying Thunder God mark. He threw a kunai in the direction of Hashirama without hesitation, but Shenyu would not let him do so. He blocked the kunai with a flash body technique. Ninjutsu kunai shadow clone technique. A flash of blue light, the kunai instantly turned into thousands of densely packed kunai, which seemed to be able to shoot Hashirama into a hornet's nest. But Shenyu understood that although Jing was a green boy, he was also a real Uchiha, and his shuriken throwing skills were not to be underestimated. Those kunai looked dangerous, but in fact they could not hurt Hashirama at all. You really underestimated me. Shenyu gave up chasing the kunai and rushed towards Hashirama, ready to wait for him. As expected, Uchiha Kagami appeared next to Hashirama in an instant, but before he could touch Hashirama, he was greeted by a fist as big as a sandbag. Kagami was not panicked at all, and the kaleidoscope in his left eye quietly turned, allowing the fist to hit his chest. A trace of surprise flashed across Shenyu's eyes, but he did not hold back. The power burst out from the peak of his fist, and a sonic boom was created in an instant. Bang! Kagami's chest was visibly rippling, and his whole body trembled violently, flashing countless afterimages in the space, and then returned to normal. He raised his hand to fight back, and the same sonic boom punch hit Shenyu's chest, blasting Shenyu, who looked surprised, away. What the hell? Shenyu frowned, and his feet drew 200-meter-long tracks on the ground. Kagami did not hesitate, and immediately grabbed Hashirama's arm and escaped into the void, without a trace. Konoha village, late at night. After the riot last night, because the protagonist of the 100 Days banquet was kidnapped, the representatives of the 4 major ninja villages left the village one after another, and the lively banquet came to an end. Fortunately, Uchiha Kagami rescued Princess Tsunade in time, and the evil thief who disturbed the peace of Konoha was brought to justice by the first generation, and the uneasy villagers were finally able to calm down. With the joint cooperation of relevant departments, the wounded were treated, the damaged buildings were repaired, and the aftermath work such as comforting the people and assessing the losses was also carried out in an orderly manner. All order in the village is operating normally, and the tranquility of the past has been restored. When the sun rises, it will be another vigorous and hopeful tomorrow. The above, all lies designed to appease the people. The real situation is, Hokage is barely alive, and his life or death is unknown. Tobirama is seriously injured and in a coma. The backbone of Konoha is missing, and the entire top management is in a mess, and they are in a state of panic. In order to stabilize the situation, the Konoha officials had to block the news and suppress these forced actions. However, in addition to the patriarchs of the major families, there is another person who is also busy. Captain Jing, the patrol of the South District has been completed. Should we take a rest? No, patrol along East Street again, and be alert. Yes, Jing, I'm sorry about what happened last night. I didn't know I was possessed. Captain Huohei, I don't blame you. There's no need to mention this matter. The most important thing now is to strengthen the vigilance around the village. The clan still needs you to coordinate more. Jing, tell me, where is that fool? I want to kill him with my own hands. Hiruzen, God, you has been killed, why do you still want to? Stop lying, you'd better tell such boring lies to the devil. That fool killed my father. As the young patriarch of the Sarutobi clan, what should I not know? Hiruzen, calm down first. Uchiha Kagami, your brother is really capable. Danzo, don't say sarcastic words at this time. Kagami, Lord Kagami. In the morning, Kagami dragged his tired body back to the clan. When he reached the corner of the street, he looked to the left for some reason. The aroma from the breakfast shop across the street made people hungry. On the open-air seat outside the house, a handsome black-haired boy raised his glass to him and smiled. Kagami's eyes trembled, and he suppressed all the complicated emotions in his heart and walked over with heavy steps. He stood across the table and couldn't help but look at the boy in front of him. The boy had delicate features, long and smooth eyelashes, and was as pretty as a woman. He wore the black uniform of the Uchiha clan. In order to make it easier to eat, he tied his long black hair into a ponytail and drank the soup, gulp gulp. The food on the table was very rich, including eel sushi, seaweed rice balls, fresh hot milk, various bentos, oden, cakes and snacks, fruit salad, and a wide variety of flavors, exuding a faint aroma. For ordinary people, such a breakfast is too prosperous. The boy ate very elegantly. With a rice spoon in his right hand, he carefully scooped out the lunchbox without leaving a grain of rice, put it into his mouth with the meatballs and chewed it, took a sip of milk, and finally slowly picked up a handkerchief to wipe his mouth. Brother, sit down. Jing took a deep breath and sat stiffly across the table. Brother, how did you get in? Boring question, you might as well ask me what I'm doing here. Shen Yu picked up the rice ball and took a bite. Are you starving? Eat, I'll treat you. A drop of sweat flowed from Jing's forehead. What are you doing here? First of all, I'm here to eat. Shen Yu took a bite of sushi and said vaguely. Last night's battle was really tiring, well, mainly mentally tired, and delicious food can fill the emptiness in my heart. Jing was unmoved, his eyes glowed red, and blood flowed from his eye sockets. He opened the Mangekyō Sharingan. The pattern rotated, like a clover in the wind. Nice eyes, really gorgeous. Shen Yu ate the salad while looking at him with his inky black eyes, full of appreciation. He seemed to remember something and asked casually, how is Tobirama? Hokage-sama and Tobirama-sama are not in Konoha. Jing stared at him. Mito-sama and Princess Tsunade have also been transferred to a secret location, they are not here. I just asked casually, brother. Shen Yu smiled slightly. In fact, I have caused so many things, the main purpose is still you. Quote. Me. A trace of doubt flashed across Jing's face, and as the light of his right eye flashed, these doubts also disappeared, like the surface of a lake with ripples disappearing. You want my eyes to merge into the eternal eyes that will never go blind, Jing said calmly. Shen Yu leaned forward slightly. Oh, have you seen the stone tablet of Nanhe Shrine? No, and I also know, Jing shook his head, you will reach out and dig my eyes in 3 seconds. After I say this, you will immediately give up this idea out of curiosity. Is this your pupil technique? Shen Yu blinked, not panicking at all because his thoughts were exposed, even though he was preparing to dig out his eyes. He used a spoon to stir the white radish in the odin. Interesting, it can actually peek into people's inner thoughts. Jing suddenly picked up a rice ball and ate it while talking. His tone was flat as if he was explaining something unrelated. In 6 seconds, you will open the Mangekyō Sharingan and release the magic puppet technique on me, but this will fail, because I, who also awakened the Mangekyō Sharingan, have a surge in mental energy and have a natural resistance to illusions. In 10 seconds, you use your spirit to possess me, you will still fail, and my other eye technique will severely defeat you. After 15 seconds, you will start to be curious about the power of my other eye technique. After 1 minute, you will be angry and strangle me and fly me out of Konoha. 3 minutes. At this moment, time seems to have gone back to 12 years ago. The two brothers sat opposite each other at home as usual, eating breakfast and chatting casually, as if it was the most ordinary thing. As he talked, Jing's right eye was already bloodshot, and blood flowed down his cheek, dripping onto the ground. Shen Yu calmly drank the milk. Wipe your face, don't scare the children. Pa, quote. The rice ball fell on the table. Jing covered his right eye and gasped. Looking into the future, it seems that you have acquired a good ability, but as your brother, I have to tell you that the Mangekyō Sharingan is a forbidden path. From the moment you open your eyes, you are destined to be blind. Shen Yu raised a smile at the corner of his mouth and said meaningfully, can your eyes see that future? A breakfast shop on the street next to the Uchiha clan. Jing panted, hesitated for a moment, and continued. The pupil technique of my right eye is called Takamagahara. It can predict the future and see what will happen in 5 seconds. After actively intervening in reality, the future you see will also change accordingly. It is a true control of fate technique. As you activate your pupil power, you can see farther. The maximum time range is 5 minutes. Tobarama asked you to tell me. Shen Yu tapped the table with his index finger, a little dissatisfied. That's right, Jing said frankly. Teacher said that sometimes, providing some appropriate intelligence can deter the enemy and achieve the effect of bloodless battle. The old thing is not dead yet, Shen Yu frowned and said regretfully. At that time, I was busy dealing with Hashirama and opening your eyes, but he saved his life. Jing wiped the blood off his face and said, I have told the teacher all my pupil techniques and effects. Under his command, I may be able to fight you. Shen Yu smiled faintly. Fight with me. You don't think you have a chance of winning, do you? Brother, I won't let you succeed. Even if it is fighting, I will not retreat. The mirror is the courage. Looking around with interest, you are very confident. This is good, but just don't know, is this Wooden Leaf village confident enough? Jing Zun was shocked. He thought of something bad. I will be buried for you. At this time, there was a tender voice floating on the street. Ma, look at the elder brother, he looks beautiful. It was a girl with a twist braid. She was standing by a middle-aged beauty-embraced baby. Zili, don't point your finger at others, that's impolite. She scolded her daughter while bowing slightly to Shen Yu with an apologetic smile. It's okay, I like little girls with sweet words. Shen Yu nodded and waved to the little girl, who smiled sweetly and ran over. Jing was motionless, watching all this with a serious face. Brother, let me test you. What's your name? Shen Yu looked at the childish and cute girl, sat back in his seat, and picked up a piece of cake. The girl said openly, my name is Uchiha Zili, I am 4.5 years old this year, and my brother is Uchiha Kirito, who is only 3 months old, and... She suddenly looked around like a thief, tiptoed over. Shen Yu leaned over with a smile, and heard her whisper. I'll tell you a secret, my brother has the same birthday as Princess Tsunade, and yesterday's 100-day banquet was actually his 100th day. Shen Yu smiled and couldn't help but touch her little head. Her warm eyes, combined with her delicate and soft face, made her smile full of sunshine. Zelie is so smart. Smart children must be rewarded. Come, brother will treat you to cake. Don't worry, my hand didn't touch it. Thank you, big brother. Jing stared at this scene blankly, as if petrified. At a certain moment, he even forgot to activate the pupil technique, and his heart twitched slightly, and suddenly became empty, filled with some sour emotions. Zelie is here. Shen Yu stared at her black and white eyes and said earnestly, you must remember that there is no high or low, anyone can be a princess, including you. Zelie can also be a princess. Zelie pointed her finger and asked carefully. Of course. He looked at the girl's confused eyes and said softly, so, don't be proud of your brother and Tsunade having the same birthday. We Uchiha are no worse than anyone else. Chiri ate the cake in small bites, his eyes suddenly bright. By the way, I haven't told Chiri my brother's name yet. As for me, Shen Yu pondered for a moment and asked, do you think my brother is a bad person? Chiri immediately shook his head, his pigtails shaking. Big brother is the most beautiful and best brother I have ever seen. Then, remember your answer today. Shen Yu lowered his voice and said in a volume that only Chiri could hear. My name is Uchiha Shen Yu. No matter who you hear me from in the future, it is all fake. Only at this moment, the me in front of you is real. Zelie nodded, not quite understanding, and ran away with the call of the middle-aged beautiful woman. After the mother and daughter walked away, Shen Yu looked at Jing and said slowly, let's continue our topic. You just seem to think you could challenge me. I don't want to fight with you. Simple, just hand over your eyes and I'll let you go. Shen Yu chuckled, let Konoha go too. Jing swallowed his saliva and asked tentatively, you want to threaten me with innocent villagers? What are you thinking? Shen Yu glanced at him, killing civilians, killing the elderly, women and children, what's the difference between this and beasts? Then I'm full. Shen Yu finished the last mouthful of soup and stretched with satisfaction. I'll give you a chance for a fair duel. He stood up and put a stack of banknotes on the table. 3 days later, the battle in the End Valley. Jing also stood up, visibly nervous. What's wrong? Weren't you full of fighting spirit just now? Kamiya's tone changed. With a chill, I will wait for you there. If I don't see you in 3 days, then, I will put the heads of certain people on your bed one by one. Sarutobi Hiruzen, Shimura Danzo, Utane Kaharu, Mito Kato En, and the heads of the Hyuga, Inoshika Cho families, Aburame, Inazuka, Kurama, these families. I will send them to your door in batches one by one. Kamiya pretended to be regretful, although I have no hatred with them, who made them your bond. Jing's face flushed. Isn't this a massacre? He did not doubt the feasibility of this statement at all, because he knew very well that the man in front of him was the man who defeated the god of ninja. Even the teacher, when mentioning the name of Kamiya, his face was uglier than eating shit. Of course, you can't blame me. Shen Yu walked leisurely and came to Jing's side. When that time comes, you must remember that it was your cowardice that killed them. After saying that, he walked straight into the distance and disappeared in an instant. In the Land of Fire, on a hidden mountain. This was once the secret base of the Senju clan during the Warring States period. It has been preserved after the war because of its complete medical facilities, hidden and superior geographical environment, and advantages such as easy defense and difficult attack. After the establishment of Konoha, Tobarama would regularly arrange his confidants to maintain the normal operation of the base in case of emergency. It is cold at high altitudes. When the cold wind in the morning blew in through the window, the curtains swayed, and Tobarama on the bed slowly opened his eyes. He just moved a little, and the pain from the wound on his chest made his face twitch. He endured the pain and propped himself up, and found that he was naked with white bandages wrapped around his chest and abdomen, 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside, covering the wound that had been sutured. He took a break for a while, and felt that he had recovered a little strength, and then he slowly got out of bed with a grin. Shen Yu's knife, with a fierce killing intent, missed by just a little bit, and almost left his life on the coast of Taki country. In order to prevent being hunted down by Shen Yu, he arranged for his guards to transfer himself and Hashirama and other members of the Senju clan here before he fell into a coma. Master Tobarama, you are awake. The medical staff pushed the door open and found Tobarama sitting on the bed, and their faces were immediately full of surprise. Tobirama waved his hand, indicating that she didn't need to panic. He raised his head slightly and saw a familiar figure in white through the half-covered door. He put on his shoes and got out of bed, and casually pulled a coat to put it on. Seeing this, the medical staff immediately came over to help him. "I'm not so weak yet." Tobirama rejected her kindness and walked out of the door alone with trembling steps. On a cliff a little further away, on a smooth bluestone, Senju Hashirama was sitting with his back to the base. He was wearing neat white clothes, breathing steadily, sitting upright on the cliff, looking at the direction of Konoha from afar, as if he had merged into nature. "Brother, you woke up very early." "Oh, it's Tobirama." Hashirama turned around and smiled, showing his white teeth. "Yes, I feel inexplicably refreshed." He looked very good, and his exhausted look was completely gone, as if the earth-shaking battle last night had never happened. However, Tobirama suddenly stopped and his pupils shrank suddenly. In his subconscious perception, there was no life in Hashirama's body, and the rich vitality like the scorching sun in the past had completely disappeared. His face was gloomy, his mood was stagnant, and his eyes looking at his elder brother were gray. However, Hashirama was unaware of it. He smiled happily and asked his younger brother to sit next to him. "Tobirama, look, from here, our Konoha is really in the center of the land of fire." Hashirama showed a satisfied smile and pointed to a direction at the foot of the mountain, surrounded by mountains and clear water. The place where the village was built was really the right one, ha 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 ha. "Brother, you are going to die," Tobirama reminded hesitantly. Hashirama smiled. "Yes, so you shouldn't show this expression. The last moment of your life should end with the farewell of relatives and friends. Don't look sad, smile." "Brother, I can't laugh." Tobirama was in a heavy mood and looked at Hashirama with some confusion. "Aren't you worried about the village? After you die, I really don't know what to do." Tobirama looked at his hands with a confused look. This was the first time in 40 years that he showed such an expression. "Don't do anything, just let it go," Hashirama said. "Let it be. Am I going to watch Uchiha Kamiya destroy Konoha?" Hashirama took a breath of the fresh and cool mountain air, and then exhaled a long breath, as if he wanted to spit out all the fatigue of his life. He suddenly said, "Village, as long as there are people and peace, there is no place that is not a village." "Brother, I don't know why, after waking up, I felt that I had broken free from some kind of shackles. Suddenly, I figured out a lot of things. It was really unprecedented relief." Hashirama stretched his waist and showed a satisfied expression. "Besides, Uchiha Kamiya will not destroy Konoha." "Why?" Tobirama frowned. "Like Madara, his target has never been Konoha. He just wants revenge and wants to kill us, the executioners who survived the warring states period. The reason is..." Hashirama stretched out a finger. "Suna is still alive." "That's just his trick." Tobirama shook his head immediately. "He is Madara's disciple, and he is also a principled person." Hashirama sneered. "Believe me." He looked down the mountain, watching the mountain mist and the clouds rising. Looking at the boundless blue sky and the lush greenery, his eyes were satisfied and leisurely, without a trace of nostalgia. Perhaps, leaving the future to these children is the right decision. Hashirama sat cross-legged, his hands naturally placed on his knees. The breeze blew his black hair, and he could hear him humming softly. "I have never done good deeds in my life, and I have killed and set fires many times." Suddenly the golden rope was opened, and the jade lock was broken here. "The autumn wind came to Konoha village, and today I know who I am." He smiled and closed his eyes, listening to the rustling sound of the wind blowing the fallen leaves, peaceful and serene. Konoha 13th year, November. Hashirama Senju died suddenly. 3 days later, the Valley of the End. In the early morning, the autumn wind blew a little, and the fallen leaves swirled. Perhaps it was because of the waterfall that was close at hand. The moist water vapor mixed in the wind of the canyon made Shenyu's long hair flutter slightly. This place was originally a river valley with uneven terrain. It was the desperate battle between Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama 6 years ago that changed the landform and turned it into a magnificent waterfall. In order to commemorate this war, Konoha specially selected skilled craftsmen and spent a year to build huge statues for the two of them standing on both sides of the Valley of the End. At this moment, Shenyu stood on the top of the statue of Uchiha Madara, standing with his hands behind his back, his eyes calm, as if waiting for something. After an unknown amount of time, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. A kunai fell from the sky and pierced the opposite bank, and then a figure appeared out of thin air and stood on the top of the statue of Hashirama. Uchiha Kagami. He wore a close-fitting blue armor, a forehead protector, a scroll hanging from his waist, armor on both arms and legs, 2 long swords on his back, and a bulging miniature scroll in his waist bag. His face was solemn and he was fully armed. In comparison, Shenyu seemed much more relaxed, wearing a loose black clan robe, with black hair naturally loose, and no other weapons except a light blue divine sword. Very good, brother, I am very happy that you can come as promised. Shenyu smiled. Brother, Jing was silent for a while, and suddenly said, Hokage-sama passed away. Oh, Shenyu was stunned and asked, what about Tobirama? What? Jing stared at Shenyu's nonchalant expression, and couldn't help blurting out. Judging from your reaction, he should not be dead. Shenyu put his hands on his hips and moved his body like an old man doing morning exercises in the park. It doesn't matter, let him experience the pain of witnessing the departure of his loved ones. But, I am still very touched that you can come on time today. He tilted his head. After all, I don't want to kill people recently. I feel complicated to send the God of Ninja to his death. Brother, what are you going to do? Don't you know? Jing stepped forward and shouted. Take my eyes and merge them into the eternal Mangekyō Sharingan, then what? What are you going to do next? What is your ultimate goal? Do you really want to destroy Konoha? You have grown up and have learned to ask questions now. Shenyu smiled and looked at his brother. Then, it doesn't matter to tell you, I really have no interest in your shitty Konoha. My goal is only there is one, that is to keep getting stronger, so that I can protect everything I want to protect in the near future. Quote. Future. Jing was a little confused. Your current strength is equal to that of Hashirama-sama, what else in this world can threaten you? Foolish brother, the future battle will not be much easier than now. Shenyu smiled and shook his head. What can you see with your eyes? Jing was silent for a while, and whispered, I only know that Hashirama-sama is a hero who pacifies troubled times. If you kill him, the world will be in chaos. I don't know how many innocent people will die. So, what does it have to do with me? Shenyu narrowed his eyes slightly, and a sharp breath flashed. If the war really happens, those who died are all the sins committed by Hashirama Senju. It was him who escalated the war. Jing frowned, and subconsciously wanted to refute Shenyu's point of view, but he opened his mouth and said nothing. The reason for Hashirama's defeat is that he is not strong enough. Shenyu shook his finger. Since you have made up your mind to suppress all countries by yourself in exchange for peace, then suppress them to the end. What's the matter with me killing you in the middle? What? Jing stared at Shenyu in disbelief, thinking it was absurd. In fact, I have never criticized Hashirama about the way to achieve peace. His mistake is that he is not strong enough. Strong enough to suppress everything, so strong that no one dares to have the intention of rebellion, so strong that he lives as long as the heaven and earth, and shines as brightly as the sun and the moon. Strong enough to, eternal. Shenyu looked at his brother and licked his lips, because he is not strong enough, he is wrong, and this will also be the reason for your defeat. The reason for defeat. Jing raised his head, and as his black hair moved without wind, his eyes instantly changed into kaleidoscope patterns, bright and beautiful. Brother, all I can see is your appearance of leaving in disgrace. Swish. With a flash of afterimage, Shenyu instantly appeared in front of Jing. The red light in his eyes was pulled out of the flowing shadow at a very fast speed, and when he slapped him with a palm, the crisp sound of sonic boom came late. Jing moved sideways and moved his steps as if he had already sensed it, narrowly avoiding the palm, and dozens of kunai slipped out of his waist bag, and the whole person disappeared directly on the spot. The next moment, Shenyu's right leg swept flat, and pounced into nothing. In the vision of 2 pairs of Mangekyō Sharingan, time seemed to be pulled extremely slowly, dozens of kunai were spinning in the air, and Shenyu had locked a certain position and punched out. Bang! A solid touch came from the peak of the fist, and a figure appeared out of thin air, and was folded in half by Shenyu, but he was just a shadow clone. White smoke exploded one after another, and 7 Uchiha Kagami appeared at the same time, holding knives in both hands and slashing at Shenyu's body. The same trick will not work. Shenyu opened his hands, and the shadow under his feet instantly burned up, like a pot of boiling hot soup. Countless long spears made of black flames suddenly pierced out, piercing through all the figures, and those kunai that had not yet fallen to the ground were also cut off and melted. The novel was taken from the Raleigh's website. Close where you're reading it and support us on our website for more free novels. Flame Style. Flame Thunder God. Shenyu's eyes condensed, and the fire of Amaterasu was completely recovered, condensing into a long spear of fire, and inserted a figure into the stone wall not far away. Brother, are you adapting to my Takamagahara? In the scattered smoke and dust, Kagami walked out with a calm face. Except for his right eye with bloodshot, he had no injuries on his body. The power of time is not so easy to adapt to. At least in the future I see, you can't do it. Amaterasu was still burning on his shoulder. When he finished speaking, the flames dissipated. Crack, Jing disappeared from the spot, turned into a shadow, and punched Shenyu in the chestmouth. Oh, the speed has increased, and the strength has also increased a lot. Shenyu showed a look of surprise, and ripples appeared 3 inches in front of his chest, as if an invisible wall blocked Jing's fist steadily. He raised his foot and stepped heavily, and there was a loud bang. The ground collapsed instantly, countless rubble floated up, and the surging shock wave bloomed above the head of the statue of the pillar. Jing had already jumped high, obviously, foreseeing this scene in advance. Shenyu smiled slightly. His hands turned into afterimages and touched each piece of rubble lightly with his fingertips, and countless rubble broke through the air, collided with each other in midair, and finally shot towards Uchiha Jing. Bang 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 bang. Jing opened his hands and let the rubble fall on him like raindrops. As his body rippled like the surface of the water, he landed safely. Shenyu had been waiting for a long time, and kicked him into the water with a powerful kick, splashing 100 meters high. Fire Style. Great Fireball Technique. As the strong light came on, the water surface seemed to be burned, and waves gurgled. A huge fireball blasted towards Shenyu. Shenyu narrowed his eyes. The size of the fireball was exaggerated, with a diameter of almost 100 meters, several times larger than the head of the statue of the pillar. He raised his sword finger and swung it upward. In the sharp sound of the wind, the fireball was split in 2 from the middle, turning into 2 tall fire walls, whizzing past the 2 sides of the statue of the pillar. Below, Jing had just flipped out of the water when he was hit by a green sword light. However, he was not split in half. His feet slid on the water for a distance, and the sword light disappeared. Shenyu looked down at his brother under the waterfall, lowered his shoulders and relaxed his elbows, and punched the empty space on the side. At the same time, the pattern of the magic circle in his right eye rotated slightly, and fine bloodshot appeared instantly. In an instant, Jing, who was 1,000 meters away, appeared out of thin air on Shenyu's right side, and his cheek hit Shenyu's fist hard. However, he also took advantage of the situation to turn around, and a big swing punch directly broke through the water molecule barrier and hit Shenyu's chest hard. Boom! Shenyu smiled contemptuously, standing still like a mountain. He used 90% of his strength in this punch, and the ground exploded instantly, the airwaves rolled out, and the surging wind seemed to tear everything around. Even if Hashirama was alive, he would have broken bones and tendons if he was hit, but Jing's body once again swung a strange afterimage when he was hit, and he stood up again after flying only a few dozen meters. He looked at his brother calmly, unharmed. Is your left eye the ability to absorb power and enhance yourself? Shenyu looked at him with a speculative look, and he was slightly interested. As expected of my brother, you should have guessed it a long time ago. Jing did not keep the secret and introduced his eye technique directly. The eye technique of my left eye can absorb all forms of energy and convert it into my own energy to gain amazing strength, speed, endurance, and physical strength. After absorbing the energy, it will be stored in my body and released at will, including but not limited to, directly converting the absorbed energy into kinetic shock waves, releasing it from any part of the body to the surroundings, and strengthening the power of ninjutsu and physical techniques. Jing gently brushed his left eye, and the ink-colored pattern of the clover rotated faintly. Its name is Garuda. In the Valley of the End, above the statue of Hashirama, the 2 brothers stood facing each other. Uchiha Kagami was imposing, and he seemed calm as he tried the power of the Mangekyō Sharingan for the first time. Use my power to hit me. Shen Yu moved his wrist calmly, shook his head and sighed. Unfortunately, even I can hardly break through my own body, let alone your borrowed means. Brother, my mission has always been to protect my eyes. Kagami said slowly, as long as I am invincible, that's enough. Invincible. Shen Yu lifted his hair, and a ferocious smile crossed his mouth. Who gave you this illusion? As he spoke, his right eye spun, and the whole person's state was instantly full, and the bloodshot in the whites of his eyes disappeared completely, clear as jade. The next moment, he disappeared from the spot, and hundreds of identical black-clothed figures appeared around Kagami at the same time. Autumn dew on leaves, random sword flow, crazy teeth burst. The sword body is light-colored glass, and the jade-green sword energy is overwhelming, reflecting Jing's face with a miserable green. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The air was torn apart, the ground was flattened inch by inch, and thick smoke rose into the sky. In just a few breaths, half of the head of the statue of Hashirama was gone. The turbulent flow danced wildly, and Jing was bathed in the storm of sword energy, and his body rippled and undulated. The two bloody kaleidoscopes rotated faintly, and the left eye was bloodshot, and the right eye was bleeding. Garuda can allow him to absorb all kinetic energy at the moment of the sword energy, protecting him from harm. With the blessing of Takamagahara, he reflected all the afterimages in the air into his eyes, and made countless attempts in his mind. The future is constantly being rewritten. Ah! Jing looked up to the sky and howled, and the whole person rose from the ground. With a knife, a certain afterimage immediately solidified, and the air waves swept past. Ding! The blade broke through the water molecule barrier and hit Shen Yu's forehead. The metal hummed, that was the long sword in his hand wailing. Although it only touched the opponent's body for a moment, the huge force caused the long sword made of jade steel to tremble violently and break inch by inch. In contrast, the opponent's body was unscathed. Jing had expected this result long ago. He swung his left fist at the moment the blade shook violently, but Shen Yu, who was smiling, raised his head and dodged it. Two figures fell from midair, and the trajectory was mixed with countless phantoms of fists and feet. Jing was not discouraged at all. The energy accumulated in his body made his movements extremely fast. The power of physical skills alone had surpassed the shadow level. But he didn't even touch the corner of the opponent's clothes. Shen Yu rested his hands on his head leisurely, not in a hurry to attack, but just dodged, with a chic movement, and easily predicted all of Jing's attacks, as if he was the caster of Takama Hara. No, I can't do it. It's just wishful thinking to want to defeat him. Jing's face was visibly cautious. He had tried his best to activate the pupil technique, but in the future seen by his right eye, Shen Yu had no chance of being hit. So, even the knife just now was deliberately taken by him. Single quote. As the thought of retreating emerged in his mind, Jing's punches were not so sharp, and his offensive footwork slowed down. Tisk, that's not enough, try harder. Shen Yu curled his lips unconsciously, showing a disgusted expression. How can a guy who gives up easily become a strong man? Thinking back to the time when he practiced physical skills with Madara-sama, he didn't stop punching even when he was beaten into a pig's head. This level alone can't protect anyone. Shen Yu grabbed Jing's wrist with his backhand, twisted his waist to gather strength while pulling, silently chanted, the third gate of life, and with the burst of airflow, he punched out a fierce liver-blasting punch. The force was so great that the fist tip even slid out 5 hot and twisted trajectories in the air. Boom! Jing opened his eyes wide, and fierce strength penetrated his body. The majestic kinetic energy instantly overwhelmed the absorption frequency of Garuda. His left pupil suddenly turned blood red, and the blood blurred his vision. He flew out like a rag sack, smashed the ground one after another, and embedded fiercely in the stone sculpture on the opposite bank. Coincidentally, that position was exactly Uchiha Madara's chest, the place where Hashirama's flesh and blood had been transplanted. Oh, this is unlucky. Shen Yu scratched his head and said with some difficulty, this piece of meat took Master Ban 6 years to grow. In the crack of the stone wall, Jing was still digesting the energy running around in his body, but his pupils suddenly shrank. The next second, he appeared strangely beside Shen Yu, and was kicked into the ground by an unavoidable kick. The huge force penetrated the entire statue, shaking out countless cracks. Brother, is this the future you chose? Shen Yu looked down at Jing from a high position, wisps of green air emerged from his body, and 2 red jade-like eyes were floating with a captivating light. Another kick landed, the same position, the same heavy blow. Boom! The ground sunk into a huge pit. Jing coughed up a mouthful of blood, his ribs were broken, and he felt that his internal organs were shifting. Seeing the opponent's foot lifted again, he blasted energy to the ground, trying to use the momentum to leave this fatal pit, but his vision changed and he returned to the original position again. Boom boom! The statue of the pillar began to shake wildly, cracks appeared from top to bottom, and there were cracked lines from head to toe. Pieces of gravel fell, splashing water, and dust filled the air. Ah! In Jing's roar, the energy that had been accumulated for a long time burst out, a golden light projected from his body, the flames bloomed, and quickly turned into a hideous skeleton, the air wave rushed up to the sky, and even the clouds were torn to pieces. Susanoo! The golden energy gushed out like a spring, blasting Shenyu away with one move. However, he adjusted his body shape in the next moment, using the water barrier as a pedal, like a diving peregrine falcon. The smoke and dust were torn apart by the fist wind, and a huge golden skeleton roared to the sky. Countless meridians filled the bone gaps in an instant, turning into solid flesh and blood. Its body grew a bit, and the whole body was as bright as gold, rippling with clear brilliance. Jing covered his chest and stood staggering in Susanoo. His eyes were filled with blood, and in the blurred vision, a figure shot out. The golden half-giant swung out a powerful fist, colliding with Shenyu's fist. There was no strong collision as imagined, and the crisp, crack, sound flashed and disappeared, like glass shattering. Shenyu's body seemed to be cast with divine iron, and every inch of his body was crystal clear like jade, indestructible, and extremely powerful. He didn't even condense a water molecule barrier, but used the most primitive method, like a fierce cannonball, to smash through Jing's Susanoo and hit his lower abdomen with a punch. The fist burst out, and the surging air waves whistled past. Jing's body was instantly folded in half and shot into the water again. Shenyu raised his hand and grabbed the air in front of him. The ultra-long-range vision of his right eye instantly locked Jing's position underwater. As the red light bloomed, he pinched Jing's neck out of thin air. "Oh, I hit you too hard." He carefully looked at his brother's face, or to be more precise, his eyes. The left eye that had been maintaining Garuda was already filled with blood, and blood was flowing. The right eye that performed Takamagahara was also red, and the blood on the cheek even showed signs of drying up. "Brother, the power of the pupil is limited. The more you burst, the faster the darkness will devour you." As he spoke, Tianji Chongli quietly activated. Shenyu smiled lightly, and the state of third life gate was lifted, the pupil was clear as usual, and all damage was reset to 0. Shenyu grabbed Jing's neck with one hand and slowly lifted him up like a chicken. This grand battle between brothers soon came to an end, like a flashing meteor, coming and going in a hurry. "The winner has been decided, and it's time for you to offer your eyes." Shenyu smiled and raised his hand, and his slender fingers reached out to Jing's eyes. Buzz! As soon as his fingertips touched Jing's eyelids, his body began to ripple, and the afterimage condensed, absorbing all the kinetic energy of his fingertips. Shenyu frowned slightly and silently increased his strength, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't pierce Jing's eyes. His body was like a tough and soft wall, and the slightest contact would make him lose his strength and all the kinetic energy would be absorbed. Shenyu's eyes became cold, and his tone lost patience. "Remove this spell, or you will go blind." Jing opened his blood-red eyes. Although he could no longer see Shenyu's appearance and his eyes gradually lost focus, he still stubbornly maintained, "Garuda. Brother, this is the future I chose." He raised the corners of his mouth and raised a tragic smile. Shenyu snorted coldly and threw him to the ground with a boom, smashing a human-shaped stone pit on the ground. Jing raised his head tremblingly, his face was bloody, and his bones were about to fall apart. Although he was using the energy absorbed by Garuda to repair his injuries, he still didn't even have the strength to get up. The energy that Garuda can absorb is limited. The huge kinetic energy carried by the powerful 3 legs just now almost burst him. If he hadn't used Susanoo to release the energy in time, he would have been backfired by the surging energy in his body, and turned into a devastating golden flame and exploded to death. This is also the fatal flaw of the eye technique, Garuda. He knew very well that Shenyu's attack was gentle enough. If he had directly burst out with the overwhelming force when fighting against Hashirama, he would have been killed instantly without a doubt, and his left eye would have been blinded immediately. But obviously, he made the right bet. What Shenyu needed was a pair of intact and functioning Mangekyō Sharingan. As long as he kept holding on to Garuda, Shenyu would not kill him. This was also the strategy he came up with after thinking hard for 3 whole days. Fight against his brother? Are you kidding? He didn't even pull out the divine sword. That was the man who defeated Hashirama and now stood at the top of the ninja world. If Shenyu really wanted to kill, he would have been killed in seconds. He knew in his heart that every breath of air he could breathe now came from his brother's kindness. You don't want me to get your eyes. Shenyu stepped on Jing's chest, and his handsome face flashed with the indifference of a tyrant, and his clear eyes seemed to reflect an iceberg. Jing shuddered, and the murderous aura came over him, and the biting coldness eroded him. He could do nothing except trembling in fear. Do you really think I won't kill you? Shenyu exerted force slowly. Although he was absorbing energy, Jing's chest still made a crunching sound that was about to collapse. Kill you to take your eyes. Even if this is a pair of blind eyes, I can trace it back to completeness. Jing coughed up a mouthful of blood and simply lay on the ground with his legs spread out. Although he was embarrassed, he still laughed out loud, and bright blood oozed from his teeth. Brother, you can trace back everything in the world, but the minimum target of tracing back can only be selected as a macro individual. If you do that, my eyes will still return to me. I have seen that moment. He squinted his eyes and tried his best to see his brother's face clearly, but there was only a vague outline in his vision. I know that what I did is despicable and ugly, but in your eyes, am I not just such a younger brother? Shenyu took a deep breath, and all kinds of emotions flashed in his eyes, including anger, disgust, and a flash of fierceness. He slowly raised his feet and stepped over Jing's body. Very good, brother, wait for me here obediently. He looked at the blue sky. I will bring your companions to find you now. Those ninjas in Konoha village will not be missing. Of course, I mean their heads. Shenyu was about to take a step when he suddenly heard a desolate laugh from behind. Brother, if that's the case, I will destroy my eyes immediately. Mirror laughed at himself. I can't stop anything, I can't protect anything, but this is the last thing I can do for the village. As he said that, he pulled out a kunai from his waist bag and pointed the tip at his eyes. Shenyu slowly turned his head. Do it. Pucci. Mirror is a robot without emotions and pain, and it is determined to do it. Following the order, he pierced his right eye. He pulled out his kunai, and a handful of hot blood splashed down. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he pierced his left eye again. Blood gushed out. Jing propped up his upper body, trying to find Shenyu with his empty eyes. The ink-colored air surged, and a big black hand quickly reached out, like a python pouncing on its prey, and pinched Jing's broken body in the palm of his hand. However, Shenyu's mood was unexpectedly stable. He was not as angry as Jing saw in the future. He just pulled Jing in front of him, thinking, I have to say, as a dog of Konoha, you are really loyal. Jing listened attentively, and the breeze brought naked mockery. He followed the sound and turned his face away. Brother, compared to my eyes, the lives of those people in the village are not worth mentioning to you at all, he spoke weakly. The pupil technique, Garuda, disappeared along with the damage to his left eye, and the energy in his body also dissipated, no longer healing his injuries. Shenyu showed a meaningful smile. You dare to destroy your eyes in front of me, so I will kill a few of your companions to vent my anger. Is it reasonable? Reasonable. Jing's breath was visibly weak. But in that case, you will miss the best time to trace my eyes back, which will do more harm than good, and the gain will not outweigh the loss. HMPH, did you even see this scene? No. Shenyu touched his chin. It is because you saw this scene that you dared to destroy your eyes so brazenly. Brother, I am just proving my consciousness, the consciousness of sacrificing everything. Jing whispered. I know that if I can't let you get what you want this time, you will really raise the village to the ground, and this is also the ending that neither of us wants to see. Then you should choose a win-win ending, give me the eyes, and save Konoha at the same time. He stared at Jing's body, and shook his Susanoo bone arm. Tell me your conditions. Hehe, you are worthy of being my brother, you saw through this. Start with the Mangekyō and leave Konoha with Madara. Signing in for 8 years, I was exposed as a zillionaire, 1026 gratitude. Jing lowered his head, and his vitality was slowly draining from his body. Brother, I can give you my eyes, but I have a condition. Shen Yu showed an expression of, as expected, tell me. 5 years, Jing took a deep breath, after 5 years, I will personally offer my intact eyes to you. During this period, please don't attack Konoha. Just like that, Shen Yu raised his eyebrows. Yes, I only need 5 years, brother. Jing said weakly. It was not easy to establish Konoha. Before that, I lived in a dark world every day, worried and anxious, worried that you would leave me forever one day, just like my father and mother. Shen Yu's heart moved, the breeze blew his long hair, and his eyes trembled imperceptibly, like a stone thrown into a calm lake, causing ripples. Jing said weakly, I have tried my best to avoid their affairs. I know, it's not my brother's fault. You were also forced to be dragged to the battlefield and forced to fight. They prayed for you and practiced medicine for you out of love, so they were killed. What qualifications do you have to blame me? Shen Yu's eyes twitched slightly, it was the Senju clan who killed them. Yes, so I resent the war, the hatred, and this chaotic world. In war, everyone is a victim. Jing struggled for a while, and his internal injuries were affected, causing him to cough uncontrollably. After a while, he calmed down. The emergence of Konoha not only made the two tribes stop fighting and make peace, but also ended the chaos and saved all the children in the world from the suffering of war. In my heart, this is the right path to peace. Brother, how much I want you to live with me in Konoha. We go to school together and become apprentices together. With your talent, you will definitely be valued. It is not impossible for you to become a Hokage in the future, but the reality is that no matter whether I walk on the streets of the village or return to the clan, I have to accept countless cold eyes and pointing fingers at me. My companions in the village suppressed me because of my Uchiha identity, and my clan excluded me because I was the disciple of Master Tobirama. Konoha did not consider me a friend, and Uchiha did not consider me a clan. At home, there was only that cold bed. For 11 years, whether in the village or in the clan, I was alone. I gave you a chance. Shen Yu sneered, but not only did you not leave with me, you also betrayed me. The eyes of Jing, the two blood holes burst into tears. I don't understand, no I really don't understand why you left the village, why you destroyed everything crazily, and why you attacked Konoha with Madara-sama. Quote, brother, I never thought of killing you. My only purpose in practicing hard until now is to catch up with you, so that you can return to Konoha and feel the real peace. If possible, I am even willing to die for you. He smiled miserably and touched his empty eyes. For me, there is more than a pair of eyes. Even if I give you my life, what's the harm? Blame it on me for being too weak and not being able to stop you before all this happened. I know that now that Hashirama-sama is dead, it is wishful thinking to take you back to Konoha. War is coming, I need strength to protect Konoha and keep this humble and hard-won peace. I only ask you, brother, I only ask you to give me 5 years, I will protect these eyes, and I will do my best to live until I deliver these eyes to you. As he spoke, his breathing became weaker and weaker, the frequency of his chest rise and fall became lower and lower, and the fingertips to the heart became colder inch by inch. Shen Yu remained silent, quietly looking up at the sky. In his clear pupils, the sky was no longer pure ice blue, but like the undulating sea surface under cirrus clouds, dark blue and deep. So, the future you chose is just to linger for 5 years. Heaven's constant standing was running slowly, time was still, space was stagnant. Jing felt as if he had left the orbit of the world, and under the influence of an indescribable mysterious force, his body recovered in the blink of an eye. His hollow eyes were intact, his body warmed up, his heart resumed beating, and power flowed through his muscles, as if all the injuries on his body were wiped out in an instant, without any process. Brother, is this brother's power? His vision was restored in an instant, and he saw his brother's face again, and that sharp look. Shen Yu suddenly attacked, and a sword finger pierced Jing's heart. The sword light spurted out like a pillar, breaking a blood hole in his back, and blood rain splashed down. Jing opened his mouth in disbelief, bloodshot eyes, although he opened the moment he recovered, Garuda, but Shen Yu's sword directly surpassed his absorption frequency. Such a powerful pupil technique. You actually used it like this. I'm too lazy to adapt. Shenyu shook his head. His tone could not hide his disappointment. Why? Jing knelt on the ground with a plop, sweating profusely. What's going on? Why didn't this scene appear in the future? In the future when Takamahara flashed, there was a scene where Shenyu tried to take his eyes as soon as he looked back, but he would return in vain under the timely coverage of Garuda. If this move was aimed at his eyes, then there is no doubt that his eyes would be blinded instantly, and his head would be pierced through together. Jing was breathing rapidly. Although his heart was repairing and his flesh and blood were healing, he still felt cold all over. A great fear lingered in his heart and lingered. What? Are you scared? Shenyu hugged his shoulders with both hands, stepped on Jing's shoulders, and tilted his head. I'm too lazy to go to Konoha to kill people, so you should bear this attack to vent your anger for them. Brother, you, shut up. Shenyu kicked him away. The lines at the corners of his lips were cold and hard. My brother has died forever on that night 11 years ago. I buried him with my own hands. Jing fell backwards and crawled a long way before he could barely get up. His eyes trembled, and he reached out to the figure in front of him, probably wanting to grab his sleeve, just like before, but he couldn't grab anything. Shenyu turned around indifferently. The sunlight blurred his outline, making it unclear, and only heard a trembling voice. As of today, if I can't see your intact eyes in 5 years, Konoha has no need to exist. The ground exploded, a whirlwind suddenly rose, and a shadow shot into the sky, rippling a circle of milky white air waves. Thump! Jing's knees softened, as if he had lost all his strength. He knelt on the ground in despair, with 2 lines of blood and tears dripping down his cheeks. He covered his heart, which was very uncomfortable, as if something had been gouged out by someone alive. What he didn't know was that in the deepest part of his heart, Shenyu had already set a confinement spell. This was the only sealing technique that Madara passed on to Shenyu. If you bury the seal in the opponent's heart, you can control the opponent at will. If you want to take the seal off, your actions will be suppressed and you can't remove the seal by yourself. However, Shenyu's attainments in this area were too shallow, and he only learned a little bit. He couldn't control Jing's body at will, but could only set up restraints so that he would protect his eyes in the first place when facing an unavoidable crisis. When his eyes were overloaded, he would forcibly interrupt the output of pupil power to prevent the Mangekyō Sharingan from being excessively damaged. Jing looked at the sky, and a deep fatigue penetrated into his bones. Just thinking of that resolute back, his internal organs seemed to be churning. He looked sad and closed his eyes silently. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.